My husband Camille apologized to me in such a Philippines manner, saying he got his mistress pregnant and we needed to break up. I was dumbfounded, and my affection for him ran out 6 months ago. Is the mistress someone I know? I asked. Yeah, it's Kyra. Remember meeting her again at Alice's wedding reception. Since then, my husband seemed completely unashamed. Alice's wedding was the year before last, so you've been cheating for over a year. Alice was a college classmate, and Kyra was a junior 2 years behind me. She was in the same research group as Alice, and we played tennis together in college, so I remember her well. She was nicknamed Little Devil behind her back and was quite famous in a way. Huh. Oh, is that so? Time flies when you get older. My husband just laughed it off. What on earth was he thinking? I can't understand him at all. I'm Viola, 30 years old. I met my husband in the college tennis club despite him being 5 years older at 35. He often showed up as an alumnus who loved happy hours, had lots of friends, and was friendly with everyone. He took great care of freshmen and was kind, but I later realized it was limited to girls after we started dating. I cried many times due to his cheating habits back then, but I loved him and married him right after graduation. But once I started working, I got to know the real him, or rather, his useless side. He frequently appeared in the tennis club's clubhouse, acting all high and mighty with the juniors because he was completely ignored by his peers. The truth was he was so incompetent at his job that he wasn't given any serious responsibilities. Even now, there's no prospect of a raise or promotion. He's just a pretentious good-for-nothing who can't do his job or household chores. I tried various things to change him after we got married, but his refusal to change made me give up. The reason I had to divorce him wasn't just that work was busy and it was a hassle, but also because his parents were good people, a reason that had nothing to do with my husband himself. So look, we need to split up quickly because of the baby coming. You can have this apartment, and I'll leave. That's the end of it, okay? I was taken aback by his careless words and my husband's sly grin. What? No way. Let's part ways cleanly. This is not a good opportunity. As I neared my 40s, I started wanting a child. I had graduated college and started working as a full-time employee. I found myself in a situation where I was earning more than my husband, and my company offered excellent parental and maternity leave benefits. I was ready to start a family, but despite our efforts, it just wasn't happening, and it broke my heart. The love I once felt for my husband had dwindled away, especially after discovering his affair and the news that he got the other woman pregnant. I was determined to cleanly and completely end the relationship. What infuriated me even more was his lack of remorse. Instead of apologizing, he simply voiced his needs and demands. It was evident that it was time to put an end to this unpleasant relationship that had dragged on for years. We would involve a lawyer, ask for compensation, and divide our property. And of course, we would expect something from Kyra as well. However, when I voiced my concerns about the financial aspect, my husband callously suggested that I take on the debt myself since it was his affair that caused the separation. When I glared at him, he relented, admitting that he might need his father's help to cover the expenses. I proceeded with the divorce proceedings and hired a lawyer. Despite multiple calls from my in-laws pleading with me to reconsider, I remained steadfast in my decision. Even my father-in-law broke down in tears, acknowledging that if I left, it would spell the end for him. My mother-in-law begged me to reconsider, expressing her love for me like her own daughter. But even they understood once I laid bare the truth about my husband's constant infidelity and laziness. Finally, they apologized profusely, hanging their heads in shame. They even paid the compensation in a lump sum on behalf of my husband, who had no savings of his own. They made him promise never to ask for their help again and to repay them promptly. I still can't fathom how such a careless and irresponsible man could come from parents as decent and responsible as his. I decided to retreat to my parents' house. The divorce proceedings, which I had anticipated as a hassle, wrapped up faster than I expected. Returning to my recently relocated family home, 6 months flew by. I found myself consumed by work on weekdays and occupied with household chores on weekends, leaving little room to dwell on my ex-husband. Then, out of the blue, my best friend Alice called, seething with anger from the moment she started speaking. Viola, did you know your ex-husband Camille and Kyra? They're living it up in a new high-rise apartment, flaunting their wealth everywhere. Kyra even had the audacity to invite me to her baby shower party. The presents alone cost over $100, and there's a $100 participation fee. It's outrageous, isn't it? She exclaimed. I was taken aback by the news. I hadn't realized that Kyra had given birth, let alone why she would reach out to Alice. Both my ex-husband and Kyra were well aware that Alice was my best friend. Why would Kyra even extend an invitation to her, knowing Alice would undoubtedly relay everything to me? When I tentatively mentioned this to Alice, her anger escalated even further. She did it deliberately, Viola. Deliberately. That awful woman had the nerve to tell me she's so happy now, thanks to Viola breaking up with Camille. Can you believe her audacity? She's the worst kind of person. I want to put her in her place somehow. Alice raged. That nickname from our college days resurfaced in my mind. Kara was always known as the little devil, stirring up trouble among seemingly happy couples. Even when relationships were strained because of her involvement, she remained composed, wearing a facade of innocence. If a couple splits up just because someone else shows interest, it wasn't true love to begin with, right? They would have broken up eventually anyway, so what's the harm? She'd say, her words dripping with sugary sweetness, all the while smirking knowingly. I felt a pang of pity for Kyra, realizing she might never have experienced genuine love. Despite this, I knew better than to involve myself with her, so I made the conscious decision to keep my distance, at least for the time being. Kara didn't matter much to me. There was something else that demanded my attention. Alice. There's only one newly constructed high-rise apartment building, right? Have you heard anything about them moving in? I asked Alice, seeking any information she might have. I've never met them, Alice quickly replied, but apparently it was very recent. They'd been boasting about securing a spot. Fortunately, someone who had bought one of the units had to relocate for work and put it back on the market without moving in. Ah, it makes sense, I nodded, processing the information. So, your moving day is Sunday, right? The baby shower party is on Saturday. You'll only need to be cautious for one day. There are multiple elevators, and they might use different entrances. You're right, we haven't crossed paths so far, so it should be fine. Alice concurred. We live together, but unexpected situations can still arise. As fate would have it, an unexpected situation did indeed unfold on Saturday. While waiting for the elevator on the first floor, I found myself face to face with my ex-husband and Kyra as they stepped out of the elevator. Hey, Viola, what are you doing here? My ex-husband spoke first, with Kyra chiming in. Viola, are you here to celebrate with us? You must be eager to see our adorable baby, aren't you? Kyra's voice was cheerful, her smile radiant, but her eyes betrayed a different story. They held no hint of amusement. What? Seriously, did you come to crash the party without an invitation? My ex-husband interjected, his tone incredulous. To scope out the high-rise apartment or catch a glimpse of our little prince. The casual reference to the baby as both baby and prince grated on my nerves. That's not it, I retorted coolly. I was just waiting for the elevator. I responded, consciously switching to a polite tone midway through the conversation. Camille was now my ex, essentially a stranger, and I didn't want to create a scene. Ha, so you're planning to visit my house after all? Camille remarked with a hint of amusement. You're so silly, Viola. Stop being stubborn. Perhaps you're just envious of our luxurious high-rise apartment and our adorable little prince. Do you still harbor feelings for me? Are you feeling lonely and longing to see me again? Camille, that's not acceptable, I interjected firmly. Regardless of any lingering emotions you think I may have, you're now married to Kyra. It's inappropriate for me to barge into your home uninvited. And as for jealousy, Kyra, you're mistaken. But I appreciate your concern. Camille continued, dismissing my words. Sorry, Viola, but Kyra and our son are our top priorities now. You're not welcome here. As I listened to their conversation, I couldn't help but feel perplexed. It had been 6 months since I last saw my ex-husband, and yet his mindset remained as irrational as ever. Kara's attitude was equally baffling. It dawned on me that my cheating ex-husband and his new partner were a perfect match in their own peculiar way. Reflecting on it, I regretted wasting my precious 20s on Camille. I'm utterly ashamed of my past with Camille, wishing to bury those memories deep in darkness. If only I had ended things sooner without making excuses, I wouldn't have to endure this nonsense from my ex-husband and his partner. My words seemed to strike a nerve with Camille, who retorted, What's that? You're really lacking charm. Learn from Kyra. Even her jealousy is endearing. She's just given birth, yet she still takes the effort to look stylish for me. Don't you find her admirable? Not at all embarrassed, I replied calmly. I was simply going to the grocery store. I was dressed in a plain white t-shirt and jeans, clean and presentable. That's the problem. I grew tired of your simplicity. Camille snapped. Enough already. We have nothing to do with each other. Just go home. Annoyed by his dismissive tone, I retorted, actually, this is my home. Seeing their disbelief, I had to explain. I've been living with my parents in this high-rise apartment for 6 months now. My father was approached by salespeople when talks of selling the land he owns arose. They suggested that living in a high-rise would be more convenient, especially as he's getting older. While it's not entirely our land, we received a substantial sum from selling it. During negotiations, we were able to move into one of the higher floors for much less than market value. Camille was taken aback. You're landowners with that much money. If I had known, I wouldn't have agreed to the divorce. Give me back the compensation money. There's no need for a property settlement, I replied firmly. The compensation was a result of your affair, and the property settlement was a matter between us as a married couple. As I spoke, I noticed Kyra mumbling to herself, her silence speaking volumes. I caught it. I can't believe Viola is living in a high-rise. I thought I had totally won, Kyra exclaimed, shooting me a glare. But Viola, you don't have a baby or a loving partner, do you? I haven't lost yet. Look, Kyra, I was never competing with you, I replied calmly. In fact, I'm thankful to you for giving me the opportunity to break up with Camille. Oh, and I'm moving out of my house tomorrow, so I don't think we'll see each other again. What? Why? You just moved into a high-rise, they both exclaimed in surprise. I shrugged, explaining, maybe it's a matter of different values. It just wasn't a good fit for my family. I found living in a high-rise unsuitable for hanging laundry outside. There are no balconies on the higher floors for safety, and only some windows can be opened. It wasn't suitable for my mother and me, who preferred drying laundry and bedding in natural sunlight and wind without using a dryer. Plus, the intense sunlight made it too hot even with the air conditioning on. The building also shakes quite a bit during even a magnitude 3 earthquake. It's designed to sway to prevent collapse, and the higher floors shake more. It was terrifying. Most stressful of all was the daily elevator ride. It gets crowded during the morning commute, and it takes time since it stops on each floor. The advertised 3-minute walk from the station felt much longer in the elevator. We were too bothered by the drawbacks unique to high-rise living, so we decided to move to a regular house with a garden. After all, luckily, our apartment sold quickly at almost the same price we bought it for. As I finished explaining, both my ex-husband and Kyra grinned. So we'll never see each other again. So, a high-rise wasn't suitable for commoners like you. It's more suited for an elite celebrity family like mine, Kyra remarked sarcastically. I couldn't comprehend how he arrived at that conclusion, but one thing became abundantly clear. What I grew to despise and ultimately gave up on was that facet of you, pretentiousness without substance, and unwillingness to change or exert any effort. I reached my breaking point with you, but it's all right now. You're beyond repair, so goodbye, I repeated, echoing my ex-husband's own words back to him. Stepping into the just-arrived elevator, I glanced at Kyra, who was glaring at both my astonished ex-husband and me. Right before the doors closed, I added one final remark. By the way, are you sure the child is truly yours? My ex-husband looked utterly perplexed, prompting me to clarify. I mean exactly what I said, right, Kyra? You understand what I'm implying, don't you? As the doors closed, I didn't know what transpired next in reality. However, during our struggle to conceive, I underwent tests at the gynecologist's, which revealed no issues on my end. I began to suspect the problem might lie with my husband, but he adamantly refused to get tested. Hence, I delivered the incendiary parting shot. Later, I heard from a mutual friend who attended Kyra's baby shower. Despite boasting about their high-rise lifestyle, my ex-husband and Kyra were residing on the 3rd floor. Additionally, despite their extravagant demands for gifts and participation fees, only cheap snacks from the grocery store were served. When a friend voiced a soft complaint, Kyra reportedly exploded, demanding gratitude for the chance to see her baby up close and insisting on payment. This sparked a heated argument between my ex-husband and Kyra, leaving their gathering in disarray. Thanks in part to my earlier cryptic remark, it was revealed that my ex-husband and Kyra had moved into a high-rise but were struggling financially, attempting to swindle money from their friends through fabricated reasons. Their deceit caused outrage among their friends, who promptly left. Meanwhile, my family and I settled into a single-family home with a garden where I recently welcomed an adorable kitten. Our former high-rise was embroiled in controversy due to significant defects and illegal construction methods, making it unsellable. Reflecting on our situation, we realized we were unexpectedly fortunate. Now, I find solace in my severed ties with my ex-husband and cherish the tranquility of my peaceful days. As I hang the laundry on a sunny afternoon, my kitten sometimes curls up on the clothes, its adorable sleeping face bringing me a sense of contentment. Today, like many others, was a good day.
The crystal wine glasses clinked as my sister Emma raised her hand, drawing everyone's attention like she always did. Big news, everyone. Her perfect smile gleamed as she looked around our parents' mahogany dining table. I just got called for an interview at Sterling Enterprises. My mother gasped in delight, nearly dropping her fork. Sterling Enterprises? The biggest tech company in the city? The very same, Emma preened, tossing her expertly highlighted hair. Senior Marketing Director position. They reached out to me specifically. Of course they had. Everything came easily to Emma. Perfect grades without studying. Dream jobs without trying. A constant stream of success that our parents never tired of celebrating. I sat quietly, pushing my food around my plate, trying to become invisible. But in this family, I was never allowed to fade into the background for long. Not when they needed someone to compare Emma to. Isn't that wonderful? My mother gushed. Now that's a real career path. She turned to me, her smile turning sharp. You should ask Emma for advice, Sarah. Maybe she can help you find something better. Better than what I was doing now, she meant. Better than the consulting work that they all dismissed as glorified freelancing. Better than building my own company from scratch, because apparently being your own boss wasn't as impressive as having one. I'm doing fine, Mom, I said quietly, but Emma was already laughing. Oh, please, you can't even get a real job, she smirked. How long are you going to pretend that your little consulting thing is an actual career? My father set down his wine glass. Emma has a point, Sarah. You're 32. It's time to get serious about your future. I gripped my fork tighter, thinking about the contracts sitting on my desk at home, the acquisition deals I was negotiating, the empire I had built while they were all busy undermining me. My business is doing well, I started to explain, but Emma cut me off. Business? Please. You work from your apartment and barely make enough to pay rent. Meanwhile, I'm about to be a senior director at Sterling. She turned to our parents. Did I mention the salary? Base pay is $250,000 plus bonuses. My mother nearly swooned. My father beamed with pride. I thought about my company's latest quarterly earnings report and had to suppress a laugh. When's the interview? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Monday morning, Emma replied smugly. Not that it matters. The position is practically mine already. The CEO specifically requested to interview me personally. I bet they did, I thought, remembering the stack of resumes on my desk. Among them, Emma's application, forwarded to me by HR with a note. Another entitled candidate with an inflated ego. Your call, boss. Well, good luck, I said, standing up. I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. Emma snickered. What? Did someone finally agree to buy something from you? Sarah. My mother sighed. When are you going to stop this ridiculous independent phase? Your father could have gotten you a proper position years ago. I thought about the nameplate on my office door. The one that reads Sarah Mitchell, CEO, Sterling Enterprises. The one Emma would see tomorrow morning. You're right, Mom, I said, gathering my things. Maybe it is time for a change. They probably thought I was finally admitting defeat. They had no idea what was coming. as I drove home to my penthouse apartment. Not that they knew I could afford one. I thought about how we got here. How their constant dismissal had driven me to build something bigger than they could imagine. It started 10 years ago when I graduated with my MBA. Emma was the star of the family then too, climbing the corporate ladder with her natural talent, while I quietly studied market trends and business strategies. When I told them I was starting my own consulting firm, they laughed. When I landed my first major client, they dismissed it as luck. When I started buying up struggling companies and turning them around, they didn't even notice. 5 years ago, I made my biggest move yet, acquiring Sterling Enterprises through a complex series of shell companies and investment firms. The previous CEO was ready to retire, and I had spent years preparing for this moment. I changed my professional name to Sarah Mitchell, my mother's maiden name, knowing my family never paid enough attention to business news to make the connection. I rebuilt Sterling from the ground up, transforming it into the tech giant it is today. And through it all, my family remained blissfully unaware, too busy praising Emma's minor achievements to notice that their unsuccessful daughter was now one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my building's private garage. A text from Emma. "You should really come to the Sterling building sometime. See what a real company looks like. I'll give you a tour after I get the job." I smiled, thinking of my corner office on the top floor, the one with the view of the entire city, the one Emma had been dreaming about in her application letter. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. In my apartment, I reviewed Emma's resume one more time. It was impressive on paper. Good education, steady career progression, solid references. But I had done my research. I knew about the projects she had taken credit for, but barely contributed to. The subordinates she had thrown under the bus, the corners she had cut. Emma had always been good at presenting the perfect image. Tomorrow, she would learn that image isn't everything. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. "Darling, I know you're probably feeling discouraged seeing Emma's success. Why don't you let your father make some calls? It's not too late to start a proper career." I set the phone down without responding and walked to my home office. The wall was covered in business magazines featuring Sterling's remarkable turnaround. Tech's most innovative CEO, one headline read, "Sarah Mitchell, the unseen power player revolutionizing the industry," declared another. My family had spent years telling me I wasn't good enough. Tomorrow, they would learn just how wrong they were. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, typing out an email to HR. "Please ensure Ms. Emma Carter's interview is scheduled in my office at 9 a.m. sharp. And make sure she waits in the lobby for at least 30 minutes before being brought up." A small petty detail, perhaps, but after years of enduring her condescension, I thought I deserved a little dramatic flair. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing company reports and finalizing acquisition plans, just like any other Sunday night. But this Sunday felt different. Tomorrow, everything would change. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked nothing like the timid daughter my family still saw me as. My suits were tailored now, my presence commanding. I had grown into my power while they weren't watching. Tomorrow, they would finally see me. And I couldn't wait for the show to begin. Monday morning arrived with a sense of delicious anticipation. I stood in my private elevator, ascending to the top floor of Sterling Enterprises, watching the city wake up through the glass walls. My Armani suit was immaculate, my heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor as I stepped out. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," my executive assistant Diana greeted me with a knowing smile. "Your 9 a.m. appointment has arrived early." She's been waiting in the lobby for 20 minutes, insisting that the CEO specifically requested her presence. I checked my watch. 8:45 a.m. Let her wait another 10 minutes. How's she handling it? Diana's eyes twinkled. She's demanded coffee 3 times, name-dropped several executives she claims to know, and told the receptionist that her sister is a nobody who can't even get a proper job. I smiled, setting my briefcase on my desk. Perfect. Has she noticed any of the magazine covers? No, Diana smirked. She's too busy telling everyone within earshot about her marketing expertise to look around. Typical Emma. So focused on promoting herself that she missed the obvious. The lobby walls were lined with press coverage of Sterling's transformation under my leadership. My photo was literally hanging above the reception desk, but Emma would never notice. She never had. Her resume listed some impressive achievements at her current company, Diana noted, arranging folders on my desk. I took the liberty of fact-checking them, and half are exaggerated, a third are outright lies, and the rest were group projects where she took sole credit. I nodded, unsurprised. Just like high school. Remember when she won that science fair? The project you actually built while she was at cheerleading practice. The very same. I sat down behind my desk, adjusting my nameplate slightly. Send her up at 9 a.m. exactly. And Diana? Make sure the security team is recording the lobby and elevator cameras. I want to preserve this moment. At precisely 9 a.m., my office phone buzzed. Ms. Carter is here for her interview, Diana announced formally. Send her in. The door opened, and Emma strode in like she already owned the place. She wore an expensive but slightly too flashy suit, her confidence bordering on arrogance. Then she saw me sitting behind the CEO's desk. The color drained from her face. Sarah? She stammered, frozen in the doorway. What? What are you doing here? Good morning, Emma, I said pleasantly. Please take a seat. We have a lot to discuss about your application for the Senior Marketing Director position. She didn't move, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But I'm supposed to meet with Sarah Mitchell, the CEO. I smiled, gesturing to my nameplate. That would be me. Sarah Mitchell, formerly Sarah Carter. Though I'm not surprised you didn't make the connection. You never did pay attention to anything I did. Emma sank into the chair across from me, her perfect composure cracking. This is impossible. You're just a consultant. You work from your apartment. Actually, I leaned back in my chair, enjoying this moment. I own this building, and several others. Sterling Enterprises has been my company for the past 5 years. I pulled out her resume. Now, shall we discuss your application? I have some questions about these achievements you've listed. You can't be serious, Emma whispered, her voice shaking. You can't be the CEO. You're nobody. That's what you all thought, isn't it? I kept my voice calm, professional. Poor Sarah can't even get a real job. Just a nobody working from her apartment. Tell me, Emma, did you ever once ask what kind of consulting I did? What companies I worked with? Or were you too busy bragging about your own mediocre accomplishments? She flinched. I didn't. No, you didn't. I agreed. None of you did. You were all too convinced of my failure to notice my success, too busy mocking my choices to see where they were leading. I opened her file. Now, about this claim that you single-handedly increased your department's revenue by 200% last year. That's accurate, she stuttered, but I could see the panic in her eyes. Interesting. I pulled out another document. Because I have here the annual report from your company. The entire marketing department only saw a 30% increase. And according to your former colleagues, that was primarily due to a campaign developed by your junior team. The one you rejected initially but took credit for after it succeeded. Emma's face went from pale to red. You've been investigating me? I investigate all potential senior executives thoroughly. We have very high standards at Sterling. I smiled. Standards that value actual achievement over self-promotion. Just then my phone buzzed. Diana's voice came through the speaker. Ms. Mitchell, your parents are in the lobby, demanding to see you. They're quite insistent. Of course they were. Emma had probably texted them the moment she saw me. Send them up, I said calmly. I think it's time for a family meeting. Emma shifted nervously in her chair. Sarah, look, about last night. About all the things I've said. Save it. I cut her off. I'm not interested in apologies motivated by fear. I've spent years listening to you undermine and belittle me. Now you get to sit there and learn exactly who your unsuccessful sister really is. The door burst open. My parents stormed in, their faces a mix of confusion and anger. Sarah, my mother exclaimed. What is the meaning of this? What are you doing in the CEO's office? Hello, Mother, I replied coolly. I was just reviewing Emma's job application. Would you like to join us? We were discussing the importance of honesty in professional achievements. My father's face reddened. Stop this nonsense immediately. You're embarrassing yourself and your sister. I stood up slowly, letting my authority fill the room. No, Dad. For once in your life, you're going to listen to me. All of you are. I pressed a button on my desk, and the wall of windows behind me transformed into a screen, displaying Sterling's financial growth under my leadership. Welcome to my company, the one you've been hearing about at your country club, the one Emma's been desperate to work for, the one that's been making headlines while you were all too busy dismissing me to notice. They stared at the numbers, the achievements, the empire I had built while they weren't watching. Now, I said, sitting back down, let's talk about what really makes someone successful in business. Shall we begin with integrity, or should we start with actual competence? The color drained from Emma's face as she realized this interview was about to become very, very uncomfortable, and we were just getting started. The silence in my office was deafening as my family stared at the financial projections on the screen. 10 years of growth, billions in acquisitions, my photo on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Business Weekly. This is all yours, my mother whispered, sinking into one of the leather chairs. Every bit of it, I confirmed, standing to walk around my desk. The consulting business you mocked? That was just the beginning. While Emma was bragging about her mid-level marketing positions, I was buying and transforming struggling companies. While you were lamenting my lack of a real job, I was building an empire. My father, always quick to anger, found his voice first. Why didn't you tell us? Why keep this secret? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Tell you? Like I tried to tell you about my first major client, or my first successful company turnaround, or any of my achievements that you dismissed because they didn't fit your narrow definition of success. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Sarah, if we had known. That's exactly the point. I cut her off. You only care now because of what I've built, not who I am. You're only interested because of the power and money, not because you're proud of what I've accomplished. I pressed another button on my desk, and security footage from last night's dinner appeared on the screen. Emma's mocking voice filled the room. Can't even get a real job. Stop, Emma pleaded, her face flushing. We get it. Do you? I turned to face her directly. Because I've been watching you build your career on exaggerations and stolen credit. I've talked to your former colleagues, your supposed references. I know exactly how you've gotten every position you've ever held. My mother stood up, smoothing her designer dress nervously. Surely we can work something out. We're family, after all. Family? I picked up Emma's resume. Like when Emma took credit for my science project in high school, or when she told her college friends I was a dropout because I started my own business instead of following the corporate path. That kind of family. I was young, Emma protested weakly. We all make mistakes. Yes, we do, I agreed. And now you get to face the consequences of yours. Diana? My assistant entered with a thick folder. The investigation results you requested, Ms. Mitchell. Thank you. I opened the folder and began reading. Falsified achievements, stolen ideas, workplace bullying complaints. I looked up at Emma. Did you really think none of this would come out during our background check? Emma's face went pale. Those accusations were never proven. Because you had Daddy's lawyers shut down every investigation. I finished for her. But Sterling takes corporate integrity very seriously. We thoroughly vet all potential executives. My father stepped forward, his business negotiation face on. Now, Sarah, surely we can discuss this privately, as a family. You lost that right last night, I replied calmly. When you sat there and let Emma mock me. When you suggested I needed your help to find a real job. When you once again made it clear that nothing I did would ever be good enough. I pressed another button on my desk. The office door opened, and Harold Bennett, my chief legal officer, entered. Harold, please explain to my family the consequences of submitting fraudulent information on a Sterling Enterprises job application. Harold adjusted his glasses. Falsifying credentials and experience on an executive-level application is grounds for immediate rejection and potential legal action, especially if previous employers wish to pursue damages for defamation or intellectual property theft. Emma's composure cracked completely. You wouldn't. You can't. Can't what? I asked softly. Protect my company from someone with a proven history of dishonesty? Enforce our ethical standards? Or are you suggesting I should give you special treatment because we're family? Sarah, please, my mother begged. Think about what this would do to our reputation. Like you thought about mine. All those years of snide comments and dismissive attitudes. I shook my head. No, Mother. Emma's application is rejected. Furthermore, I'm forwarding our findings to her current employer. They should know exactly who they're trusting with their corporate image. Emma burst into tears, but they weren't the calculated sobs she usually used to get her way. These were real, the tears of someone finally facing consequences. As for you two, I turned to my parents. I suggest you take a long, hard look at how you've treated both your daughters. One you praised endlessly despite her dishonesty. The other you dismissed despite her integrity and success. My father's face darkened. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Humiliating your family? No, Dad. I'm not enjoying this at all. I'm doing what you should have done years ago, holding people accountable for their actions. I walked to the window, looking out at the city I now partly owned. You know what the worst part is? If any of you had shown even a moment of genuine interest in my work, you would have known about all this. My name, my full name, has been in the business news for years. But you were all too convinced of my failure to notice my success. I turned back to them. Now I have a board meeting to prepare for. Harold will escort you out. Emma, you'll receive official notification of our decision in writing. I suggest you use this as an opportunity for self-reflection. Sarah, my mother tried one last time. We can still be a family. We can work through this. I sat back down at my desk, picking up a report. We'll always be related, Mother. But family? That requires respect, support, and love. None of which you've shown me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. They left in silence, Emma's tears still falling, my parents' pride in shambles. As the door closed behind them, Diana entered with a cup of coffee. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath, looking at the family photo I kept in my drawer. Not of my parents or Emma, but of my grandfather, the only one who had believed in me from the start. You know what, Diana? I am. For the first time in years, I really am. Over the next few months, the family dynamics shifted dramatically. Emma's current employer launched an investigation into her past achievements, leading to her eventual resignation. My parents stopped appearing in society pages, their social standing diminished by the revelation that they had dismissed their successful daughter while enabling their dishonest one. I focused on my work, continuing to build Sterling into an even stronger company. The business world buzzed with the story once it got out. The secret CEO who had hidden her success from her unsupportive family. It became a symbol of quiet determination triumphing over loud mediocrity. 6 months later, I received a letter from Emma. Not an email or text, but a handwritten letter of apology. For the first time in her life, she had been forced to work her way up from an entry-level position, no family connections to rely on. She wrote that she finally understood the value of genuine achievement. My parents took longer to come around, but eventually, my mother sent a similar letter, acknowledging their failures and asking for a chance to really know me, not as the daughter they had dismissed, but as the woman I had become. I kept both letters in my desk, next to my grandfather's photo, not because I was ready to forgive, but because they reminded me of an important truth. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. 1 year to the day after that fateful interview, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports. Diana entered with the latest business magazine. The cover story: Sterling CEO Sarah Mitchell, The Power of Quiet Success. The article didn't mention my family drama or Emma's failed interview. It focused on what really mattered: the company I had built, the innovations we had created, the changes we had made in the industry. Because in the end, that's what real success looks like. Not bragging at family dinners or inflating achievements, but building something meaningful, something lasting. They had called me worthless at family dinner. Now I was their boss, their superior, their example of what true success looks like. And that was worth more than any revenge could ever be. The Anderson family had built Meditech solutions from nothing, or at least that's what my Uncle Robert loved to tell everyone at every company event. Standing at the podium in his perfectly tailored suit, he'd recount how he and my father had started in their garage, 2 brothers with a dream of revolutionizing medical technology. What he never mentioned was that it was my father, James Anderson, who had been the true innovator, the genius behind the patents that built our empire. And he certainly never mentioned how he'd maneuvered to take control after my father's accident 10 years ago. I'm David Anderson, and this is the story of how I spent 5 years secretly reclaiming my father's legacy, one patent at a time. David, are you even listening? Uncle Robert's voice cut through my thoughts. We were sitting in his corner office, 42 floors above Seattle's bustling tech district. These quarterly reports are unacceptable. R&D costs are through the roof, and we have nothing to show for it. I adjusted my glasses, a gesture that always made him think I was nervous. We're making progress, Uncle Robert. The new neural interface project is a waste of resources, he cut in, tossing the report onto his mahogany desk. The board meeting is next week. I need results, not promises. Or maybe it's time to admit that unlike your father, you didn't inherit the innovation gene. I bit back my response. If he only knew that the neural interface project was already complete, its patents quietly filed under my private holding company, just like the last 3 failed projects he killed. Perhaps you're right, I said, playing my part. Maybe I should focus on something smaller. He leaned back, satisfaction crossing his face. I've been saying that for years. You're not your father, David. The sooner you accept that, the better. I gathered my papers and stood to leave. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see our company logo glowing against the Seattle skyline. Meditech Solutions, innovating tomorrow's healthcare. Oh, and David? Uncle Robert called as I reached the door. Clean yourself up before the board meeting. That shabby professor look might have worked in R&D, but you're presenting to the board now. Try to look like an Anderson for once. I nodded and left, walking past the portrait of my father that hung in the corridor. James Anderson smiled down at me, frozen in time before the accident that had left him in a coma. Before Uncle Robert had used a crisis to seize control, forcing my mother to sell her shares for a fraction of their worth. I was 17 then, too young to stop it, but not too young to start planning. My office was 20 floors down, smaller, darker, and cluttered with the organized chaos of actual research. Sarah, my assistant, and the only person who knew the truth, was waiting with a stack of documents. He fell for it, she asked, closing the door. I smiled, loosening my intentionally crooked tie. Completely. Has Marcus confirmed the patent office's decision? She handed me a sealed envelope. Came through this morning. All 7 patents approved, backdated to your original filings. The neural interface, the bioelectric mesh, everything. Your uncle has no idea they even exist. And the ownership structure. Triple blind holding companies, just like the others. Even if they trace them, they'll never get through all the layers. She paused, watching me review the documents. David, are you sure about this? Once you reveal everything at the board meeting. I touched the photograph on my desk, my father at me in his lab, both of us grinning over some shared discovery. He tried to erase my father from his own company, Sarah. Used a family tragedy to steal everything we built. And now, he has the nerve to tell me, I'm not good enough to be an Anderson? While you've secretly developed more groundbreaking patents in 5 years than the company has in the last 10, she finished. I know. Be careful. Men like your uncle don't lose gracefully. I locked the patents in my safe and turned to my computer, checking the special email account I used to communicate with my father's old friend, Judge William Morrison. The reply I'd been waiting for had finally arrived. Medical proxy transfer approved. You now have full legal authority regarding your father's care. Another piece falling into place. Uncle Robert had arranged for my father's care at a private facility, maintaining control over both his medical decisions and his remaining patents. He'd never expected me to spend years building relationships with the hospital board, documenting every neglectful decision, every missed treatment opportunity. Sarah was still watching me, concern evident in her expression. What aren't you telling me? The doctors say there's a new treatment, experimental, using technology based on Dad's original research. Research that Uncle Robert buried because it wasn't immediately profitable. I met her gaze. There's a chance it could help him wake up. My God, she whispered. Does your uncle know? He will. At the board meeting, along with everything else. I turned back to the photograph. 10 years ago, he thought he'd won everything. The company, the patents, the Anderson legacy. He thought I was just a scared teenager who'd accept whatever scraps he offered. But you were already planning this, Sarah said softly. Even then. I nodded, remembering that first night after the accident, when I'd found my father's hidden lab notebooks, when I'd discovered the truth about Uncle Robert's involvement in the equipment failure that had put my father in a coma. A scared teenager who spent the next decade becoming exactly what he wanted. The quiet, ineffective nephew who couldn't live up to his father's genius. The perfect cover for building something right under his nose. My phone buzzed. A message from Uncle Robert's secretary. Mr. Anderson requests your preliminary presentation materials by 5 p.m. I smiled, thinking of the presentation I'd actually prepared. Not the watered-down failure he was expecting, but a comprehensive revelation of every patent I'd secretly developed. Every innovation he'd dismissed as impossible. Every piece of evidence proving that I wasn't just my father's son. I was his revenge. Sarah, I said, straightening my purposefully rumpled jacket. I think it's time we stopped playing the part of the incompetent division. Call Marcus at the patent office. Tell him to prepare everything we discussed. Next week's board meeting is going to be educational. She nodded, already reaching for her phone. And your uncle? I looked out at the Seattle skyline, at the company logo my father had designed. Let him enjoy his corner office for a few more days. After all, the best revenge isn't just about winning. It's about letting them see exactly how badly they've lost. The stage was set. The patents were secured. And in 7 days, Uncle Robert would learn that the nephew he dismissed as a failure had been building an arsenal of innovations that would reshape not just the company, but the entire medical technology industry. All while playing the role of the disappointment he created. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in fighting back, but in letting them think they've already won. And next week, when those patent documents appeared on the screen, Uncle Robert would finally understand just how completely he'd lost the war he didn't even know he was fighting. The week before the board meeting passed in a blur of careful preparation. Uncle Robert, confident in his control, had no idea that every dismissive comment, every condescending gesture, was being meticulously documented. Each interaction another nail in the coffin of his carefully constructed lies. Your presentation materials are a joke, he declared, tossing my intentionally flawed preliminary report across his desk. Basic research any first-year intern could produce. Is this really the best you can do? I adjusted my glasses nervously, a gesture I'd practiced until it became second nature. I can revise it. Don't bother. He turned to stare out his window at the Seattle skyline. I've already asked Dr. Phillips to prepare a backup presentation. At least he understands what real innovation looks like. Dr. Phillips, the same researcher who had helped Uncle Robert sabotage my father's lab equipment 10 years ago. I'd found the evidence in encrypted emails, carefully preserved on backup servers that Robert thought he'd wiped clean. Of course, I mumbled, gathering the scattered papers. Whatever you think is best. His voice stopped me at the door. You know, David, maybe it's time you considered a different career path. Your father, he'd understand. Not everyone inherits the genius gene. I turned, letting him see exactly what he expected. Defeat, resignation, the familiar shame of a son who couldn't measure up. Maybe you're right. Back in my office, Sarah was waiting with the real presentation materials. Everything's ready, she said, closing the door. Marcus confirmed that all patent registrations are now publicly searchable. The timing will be perfect. I unlocked my safe and pulled out a thick folder labeled Project Legacy. Every innovation I'd developed over the past 5 years, each one building on my father's original research. The neural interface that could revolutionize prosthetic limbs. The bioelectric mesh that could regenerate damaged nerve tissue. And most importantly, the therapeutic protocol that could help patients like my father emerge from long-term comas. The hospital board voted this morning, Sarah continued. They've approved the transfer of your father's care to the new facility. Everything's in place for the treatment to begin next week. I nodded, thinking of the private medical center I'd secretly helped fund, staffed by doctors who'd worked with my father before the accident. Has Uncle Robert noticed any of the preparations? He's too busy damage controlling the Milton contract situation. Sarah smirked. Apparently, their CEO was very upset to learn that their primary contact at Meditech has been developing revolutionary technology for a competing firm. That had been one of my more elegant moves, using a shell company to file patents that would directly compete with Uncle Robert's most lucrative contracts. The resulting stock volatility had the board nervous, making them more receptive to what I was about to reveal. David? Sarah's voice softened. There's something else you should see. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a police report from 10 years ago, the official investigation into my father's accident. Most of it I'd seen before, but one detail caught my eye. A witness statement that had been mysteriously deleted from the digital records. Where did you find this? Your father's old secretary finally agreed to talk. She kept a hard copy, afraid of what your uncle might do if he knew. Sarah pointed to a highlighted section. Read this part. The statement described unusual activity in the lab the night before the accident. Someone accessing the equipment after hours, making unauthorized modifications. The witness had reported it to Robert Anderson, who assured her he would handle it personally. The next day, my father was found unconscious in his lab, the victim of an unexplained equipment malfunction. We already knew he was responsible, I said quietly. Yes, but this is proof. Official documentation that he was warned about potential tampering and did nothing. Sarah met my gaze. This isn't just about patents anymore, David. This is criminal negligence at best, attempted murder at worst. I carefully resealed the envelope. Have copies sent to every board member's private email, timed to arrive during my presentation. The next few days passed in careful orchestration. I made sure to appear distracted and unprepared whenever Uncle Robert was watching. I fumbled equipment during demonstrations, stuttered through progress reports, played the part of the failing son so perfectly that he actually began to feel sorry for me. I'd been thinking, he said during our final pre-board meeting. Maybe we could find you a position in corporate communications, something less technical. That's very kind, I replied, letting my voice shake slightly. But I'd like to try presenting my research first. One last time. He sighed paternally. If you insist, just try not to embarrass yourself too badly, for your father's sake. The morning of the board meeting, I arrived early to find Sarah already in my office, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Marcus called, she reported. The patent office just published everything. Full documentation, complete ownership trails, all of it. She paused. There's no going back after this. I walked to my window, looking down at the city awakening below. Somewhere out there, in a private medical facility, my father lay waiting for the treatment that could bring him back to us. The treatment his own brother had dismissed as impossible. Did you know, I said quietly, that the night before the accident, Dad told me he was planning to remove Uncle Robert from the company. He discovered financial irregularities, unauthorized testing, ethical violations. He was going to present it all at the next board meeting. Sarah's eyes widened, just like you're doing today. History repeats itself. I turned back to my desk, beginning to gather the real presentation materials. But this time, the son finishes what the father started. My phone buzzed. Uncle Robert's final message before the meeting. Try not to waste too much of the board's time. Dr. Phillips' presentation will cover any gaps. I smiled, thinking of the gaps that were about to be revealed in his own carefully constructed facade. The patents he didn't know existed. The witness statement he thought he buried. The evidence of his involvement in my father's accident. It's time, Sarah said softly. I straightened my tie, no more intentional sloppiness, and picked up my presentation materials. Uncle Robert wanted me to be a failure, I said. He spent 10 years convincing everyone that I couldn't live up to my father's legacy. And instead, I surpassed it. Built something bigger than he could imagine. Right under his nose. I headed for the door. Let's go show him exactly what the Anderson genius gene can do. The boardroom awaited, and with it, a reckoning 10 years in the making. Uncle Robert thought he was about to witness my final failure. Instead, he was about to learn that sometimes the greatest innovations aren't just technological. Sometimes they're the careful, patient construction of a truth so powerful it can shatter a decade of lies with a single presentation. And I had one hell of a presentation ready. The Meditech Solutions boardroom gleamed with power and privilege. 15 board members seated around a massive mahogany table, each representing billions in investment capital. Uncle Robert sat at the head, naturally, with Dr. Phillips at his right hand. I could see them exchanging confident smiles, already anticipating my humiliation. If only they knew. Let's begin, Uncle Robert announced, his voice carrying that familiar note of condescension. David has prepared a presentation on his recent research activities. Try to be patient. A few board members chuckled politely. I stood, connecting my laptop to the room's display system. Sarah sat in the corner, recording everything as planned. Thank you, Uncle Robert, I said, my voice steady. No more nervous adjustments of my glasses. No more practiced stumbling. I'd like to discuss the future of medical technology, specifically in neural interfaces and regenerative medicine. We've been through this, Robert interrupted. Your preliminary reports showed no viable. Those weren't my real reports, I said quietly. The room went still. Those were what I wanted you to see. Just like you've spent 10 years seeing exactly what you wanted to see. A failure. A disappointment. A son who couldn't match his father's genius. I clicked to the first slide. Patent documents filled the screen. My name clearly listed as inventor. Then another. And another. 7 in total, each representing a breakthrough that could revolutionize modern medicine. What is this? Dr. Phillips demanded, shuffling through his papers. These patents aren't in our database. Because they don't belong to Meditech, I replied. They're registered to my private holdings. Every innovation you dismissed, every project you killed, I developed them independently, while playing the role you created for me. Uncle Robert's face had gone pale. This is corporate espionage, using company resources for private. Actually, I clicked to the next slide, showing detailed financial records. Everything was developed using my own resources. Resources I've been accumulating since I was 17, since the day of my father's accident. The boardroom erupted in whispers. I saw several members checking their phones, no doubt finding the email Sarah had timed to arrive at exactly this moment. The neural interface you called impossible? I continued, my voice gaining strength. It's already in clinical trials. The regenerative mesh you said would never work. 3 major hospitals are preparing to adopt it. And the coma recovery protocol you dismissed as fantasy. I turned directly to my uncle. That begins testing next week, on Dad. Robert shot to his feet. D is incompetent, fraud must believe, he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. He's trying to steal my brother's legacy. Your brother's legacy? I opened the final file. Let's talk about that legacy, Uncle Robert. Let's talk about what really happened in Dad's lab 10 years ago. The police report appeared on screen, the witness statement highlighted. Then the encrypted emails between Robert and Dr. Phillips discussing equipment modifications. Financial records showing money transferred to offshore accounts the day before the accident. You see, I addressed the board directly. My father was planning to remove his brother from the company. He discovered ethical violations, unauthorized testing, financial fraud. He was going to present it all at the next board meeting. I paused, letting the parallel sink in. Sound familiar? Dr. Phillips suddenly stood, heading for the door, but 2 security guards, ones I'd personally hired, blocked his exit. 10 years ago, you thought you'd won everything, I told my uncle, who had collapsed back into his chair. The company, the patents, the Anderson legacy. You thought you destroyed one brother and controlled the other. You don't understand, he whispered. I built this company too. I deserved to nearly kill your brother, to steal his son's inheritance, to bury innovations that could help millions, just because they weren't immediately profitable. I shook my head. No, Uncle Robert, you deserved exactly what you're about to get. On cue, the boardroom doors opened. 2 police detectives entered, followed by my father's old secretary, the witness whose statement had been buried a decade ago. Robert Anderson, the lead detective, announced, "You're under arrest for attempted murder, corporate fraud, and criminal conspiracy." As they led my uncle away, I turned back to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll find complete documentation of everything I've presented today in your secure emails, along with my proposal for restructuring Meditech's leadership and implementing these new technologies. One by one they nodded. They were business people, after all. They knew a winning proposition when they saw one. The next few hours passed in a blur of signatures, handshakes, and congratulations. By sunset, I stood in my father's old office, my office now, watching the city lights come alive below. Sarah found me there, holding a fresh stack of papers. The hospital called. They're ready to begin your father's treatment whenever you give the word. I touched the photograph on the desk. Dad and me in his lab, both of us grinning. Schedule it for tomorrow. It's time to bring him home. The media's going crazy, she added. Everyone wants to know how the failed son managed to develop 7 groundbreaking patents while pretending to be incompetent. I smiled, thinking of all the roles we play in life. The failed son, the grieving nephew, the secret genius biding his time. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them I learned from the best. My father taught me that true innovation isn't about appearance or power. It's about patience, dedication, and the quiet certainty that truth eventually prevails. Later that night, I visited Dad in his new medical facility. The doctors were optimistic about the treatment's potential. Even if he didn't fully recover, they expected him to regain consciousness, to finally learn how his son had protected and avenged his legacy. "You were right, Dad," I whispered, holding his hand. "The Anderson genius didn't skip a generation. It just learned to work in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to step into the light." In the end, the greatest revenge wasn't just reclaiming the patents or exposing Uncle Robert's crimes. It wasn't even about becoming CEO of the company he tried to steal. The greatest revenge was knowing that somewhere in a prison cell, my uncle was finally understanding the truth. He'd spent 10 years mentoring his own destruction, teaching me exactly how to play the role of the failure while building something far greater than he could imagine. And that was the most innovative thing of all, because sometimes the quietest revolutions are the ones that change everything. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in what you show the world, but in what you keep hidden until exactly the right moment. Just ask Uncle Robert. He has plenty of time to think about it now. As for me, I have a company to run, technologies to develop, and most importantly, a father to help heal. After all, that's the true Anderson legacy, not power or patents or profit, but the relentless pursuit of innovations that can make the world better. One quiet revolution at a time. Family reunions are supposed to be about reconnecting, sharing memories, and celebrating together. But the Thompson family reunion had become something else entirely. An annual competition, a showcase of success and status, a chance to prove who had climbed highest on the corporate ladder. My name is Marcus Thompson, and until 3 months ago, I was the lead developer at Nexus Technologies, one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing software companies. Today, I was the family disappointment, the cautionary tale, the topic of whispered conversations around the punch bowl. "Did you hear about Marcus? Such a shame." And at his age, I stood at the edge of my aunt's perfectly manicured lawn, nursing a drink and watching my more successful relatives hold court. My cousin Peter, CEO of his own startup, was regaling everyone with stories of his latest funding round. His sister Amanda, a senior executive at Google, was showing off photos of her new Malibu beach house. Marcus, Peter's voice carried across the lawn, deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come join us. We were just discussing career transitions." The smirk on his face said everything. He'd been waiting for this moment for 20 years, ever since we were both junior developers fresh out of college. While he'd focused on climbing the management ladder, I'd stayed in the trenches, writing code, solving problems, building things that actually worked. "How's the job search going?" Amanda asked, feigning concern. "I heard Nexus let you go during their last restructuring. Such a volatile industry, isn't it?" Volatile. Right. That's one way to describe what had happened at Nexus. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was the real story behind my termination, a story that was about to unfold in exactly 3 minutes. I checked my watch. 2:57 p.m. Pacific Time. Right on schedule, every computer at Nexus Technologies would be starting their automated weekend system upgrade, including the CEO's personal laptop, which he never let anyone else touch. "You know," Peter continued, warming to his favorite subject, himself, "in today's tech world, you have to be innovative. Forward-thinking. My company just closed a $50 million round because we understand where the industry is going. I took another sip of my drink, remembering late nights in my office at Nexus, building something that would make Peter's startup look like a school science project. Fired at 40. Pathetic. That was my youngest cousin, Trevor, fresh out of business school and full of opinions about an industry he barely understood. Guess programming isn't your thing after all, cousin. The words echoed across the lawn. Other conversations stopped. All eyes turned to see how the family failure would respond. I checked my watch again. 2:58 p.m. Let me tell you what really happened at Nexus Technologies. 5 years ago, I started working on a side project. Not just any project. An AI-driven security system that could adapt to and neutralize cyber threats in real time. I called it Project Guardian. While my colleagues focused on flashy features and quick profits, I built something revolutionary. Layer by layer, line by line, I created an AI that could think, learn, and protect better than anything on the market. But I wasn't naive. I'd seen too many developers lose their work to corporate greed. So I built Project Guardian with a fail-safe, a hidden signature in the code that would activate under specific conditions. 2 months ago, Robert Kane, Nexus's ambitious new CEO, called me into his office. "Marcus," he said, not looking up from his laptop, "we're going in a different direction. The board wants to focus on consumer applications. Your security project is being terminated." I started to explain the potential of Project Guardian, but he cut me off. "We've already sold your code base to a military contractor. They'll retool it for their needs. Your services are no longer required." What Kane didn't know was that I'd anticipated this move. The day I started Project Guardian, I embedded a verification protocol deep in its architecture. If anyone tried to modify or repurpose the core code without proper authorization, the system would reveal its true creator. "Of course," I'd said calmly, gathering my things. "I understand." The next day, headlines announced that Nexus Technologies had signed a $1.5 billion contract with the Department of Defense, based on revolutionary AI security technology that Robert Kane and his team had developed. My termination agreement included a standard non-disclosure clause. I signed it without argument, much to Kane's surprise. He probably expected me to fight, to claim credit, to demand recognition. But I knew something he didn't. Project Guardian wasn't just a security system. It was a testament to every developer who'd ever had their work stolen, every innovator who'd been pushed aside by corporate politics. And in exactly 2 minutes, as Nexus's systems ran their weekend upgrade, a very special piece of code would execute. "You should have focused on management like me," Peter was saying, enjoying his moment of superiority. "Left the coding to younger people with fresher ideas." I smiled, remembering the elegant simplicity of the verification protocol. When triggered, it would systematically catalog every line of Project Guardian's code, tracing its development history back to its original creator. My phone buzzed, a news alert. Amanda noticed. "Job offer?" she asked sweetly. "I hear McDonald's is hiring." 2:59 p.m. Somewhere in Silicon Valley, in Nexus Technologies' headquarters, Robert Kane was probably sitting in his office, preparing for Monday's board meeting where he would take full credit for my work. The same Robert Kane who'd once told me that real innovators don't waste time writing code. The same Robert Kane who'd sold my life's work without a second thought. The same Robert Kane who was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating outdated developers. "Actually," I said, raising my voice just enough to catch everyone's attention, "why don't we all take out our phones? I think the next few minutes are going to be quite interesting." Trevor snorted. What? Did you finally figure out how to code a calculator app? I checked my watch one final time. 3:00 p.m. Time for Project Guardian to reveal its true guardian. My phone buzzed first, then Peter's, then Amanda's. Within seconds, the peaceful afternoon air was filled with notification sounds as every phone at the reunion lit up simultaneously. Breaking news. Nexus Technologies stock halted after authentication protocol reveals unauthorized code transfer. Peter's smirk faltered as he read the headline. Amanda's perfectly manicured fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled through the article. What's happening? Trevor demanded, his youthful arrogance cracking. I took a casual sip of my drink. Oh, just a small software update. You see, when I built Project Guardian, I included something special. A little gift for anyone who tried to steal it. More phones buzzed. More headlines appeared. Department of Defense suspends $1.5 billion Nexus contract pending investigation. Nexus CEO Robert Kane unavailable for comment as code authenticity questions emerge. Project Guardian. The hidden story behind Silicon Valley's biggest AI security system. What did you do? Peter whispered, his entrepreneurial confidence evaporating. I pulled out my laptop, the same laptop I'd used to write the original code for Project Guardian. Would you like to see? After all, you're all such experts in innovation and forward thinking. The family gathered around as I opened a secure browser window. On screen, a live feed showed Project Guardian's authentication protocol executing across Nexus's networks. Every piece of software has a signature, I explained, my voice carrying across the now silent lawn. Like DNA, you can try to hide it, modify it, claim it as your own, but with the right tools, you can always trace it back to its source. Lines of code scrolled across my screen, each one documenting its own creation history. Dates, timestamps, developer signatures, all pointing back to one source. 5 years, 3 months, and 12 days, I continued. That's how long I spent building Project Guardian. Every night, every weekend, while Kane and his visionaries were at charity galas and tech conferences taking credit for other people's work. My Aunt Patricia, Peter and Amanda's mother, gasped as another news alert appeared. Nexus Technologies faces multiple federal investigations over code authentication scandal. But they fired you, Trevor protested weakly. They owned your work. I smiled, pulling up another window. Actually, they didn't. You see, Project Guardian was never a Nexus project. I built it independently, on my own time, using my own resources. I only tested it on Nexus's systems after receiving written authorization that specifically maintained my ownership rights. The document appeared on screen, an email chain that I'd carefully preserved, showing Kane's dismissive approval of my hobby project. When Kane sold my code to the military, he triggered the authentication protocol, but I designed it to wait, to give them time to dig themselves deeper. Every time they modified the code, every time they claimed credit, the system documented it. Peter leaned forward, his startup founder's mind finally grasping the implications. The military contract was for stolen technology, I finished. Kane sold something he didn't own, something he didn't create, something he didn't understand. And now, everyone knows it. My phone rang, a number I recognized from my Nexus days. Kane's personal line. I let it go to voicemail. But that's not even the best part, I continued, opening one final document. While Kane was busy erasing my name from Project Guardian, I was filing patents. 17 of them, covering every key innovation in the system. Amanda's legal expertise kicked in. You mean Nexus doesn't own Project Guardian? I do. Every line of code, every algorithm, every innovation they sold to the military, it all belongs to me. And thanks to Kane's very public claims about developing it himself, proving theft will be remarkably easy. Trevor, his earlier mockery forgotten, scrolled through news articles on his phone. The stock, it's going to crash when trading resumes. Probably, I agreed. Corporate fraud tends to have that effect. More phones rang. Reporters, lawyers, investment firms, all trying to reach various members of my successful family. Peter's startup investors would have questions about his judgment. Amanda's position at Google might need review, given her connection to a major tech scandal. Why? Peter finally asked. Why wait? Why let them fire you if you knew you had this? I thought about all the developers I'd known who'd had their work stolen, their innovations credited to others, their contributions erased by corporate politics. Because sometimes justice needs an audience, I replied. Sometimes people need to learn that success isn't about who can take credit fastest. It's about who actually does the work. My phone buzzed again. An email from Sarah Martinez, CEO of Oracle. Impressive authentication protocol. Would you be interested in discussing Project Guardian's real potential? Dinner next week? I showed the email to my cousins. Guest programming is still my thing after all. The sun was setting over my aunt's perfect lawn, casting long shadows over the gathered family members. In Silicon Valley, I knew Kane was probably watching his carefully constructed facade crumble. Tomorrow, the real investigations would begin. But right now, in this moment, I watched my successful relatives realize that real innovation, real value, isn't about titles or funding rounds or beach houses. Sometimes it's about being underestimated, about being dismissed as outdated or redundant. And sometimes it's about writing code so elegant, so perfect, that it can wait patiently for years until the exact right moment to reveal its truth. Peter's phone rang again, probably another worried investor. Amanda was frantically texting her PR team at Google. Trevor had gone very quiet, his youthful arrogance replaced by a new understanding of how the tech world really works. I checked my watch one final time. 3:30 p.m. Project Guardian had done its job. The truth was out. And somewhere in Silicon Valley, a very expensive lesson about respecting developers was just beginning. 1 month can change everything. I sat in Oracle's main conference room, watching as Sarah Martinez finished her presentation to the board. On the screen behind her, Project Guardian's capabilities were displayed in real time, protecting Oracle's vast network with an efficiency that made their previous security systems look primitive. In the 4 weeks since implementation, Sarah concluded, Guardian has prevented over 3,000 sophisticated cyber attacks, adapted to 17 previously unknown threat vectors, and reduced our security response time by 89%. The board members' expressions had transformed from skeptical to amazed during the demonstration. They'd seen the headlines about Nexus's collapse, watched the congressional hearings about software IP theft, and followed the SEC investigation that had destroyed Robert Kane's career. But seeing Guardian in action was different. And you developed this independently? One board member asked me. While working at Nexus? I nodded. Nights, weekends, using my own equipment. Nexus only provided the testing environment with documented permission that maintained my IP rights. the same testing environment that had allowed me to perfect Guardian's authentication protocol, the very feature that had exposed Kane's theft. Well, Sarah smiled. I think we're all in agreement. Shall we make the announcement? The board's vote was unanimous. By evening, the news would break. Oracle was acquiring exclusive rights to Project Guardian for $4.2 billion, with me joining as Chief Technology Officer to oversee its implementation across their global network. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the Nexus scandal broke. Tech journalists wanted interviews. Developers' rights organizations wanted me to speak at conferences. Congressional committees wanted my testimony on corporate IP theft. But the messages I found most interesting were from other developers. Countless stories of stolen work, erased contributions, and innovations credited to executives who couldn't write a line of code. Guardian had become more than just a security system. It had become a symbol of justice in an industry that too often rewarded theft over creation. As I left Oracle's headquarters, my phone rang, a familiar number. "Hello, Peter," I answered, hearing my cousin's strained voice. "Marcus, I need your help." After the Nexus scandal, Peter's startup had faced intense scrutiny. Investors had discovered that his revolutionary technology was mostly borrowed from his developers, good people who'd been silenced by NDAs and legal threats. "My developers are leaving," he continued. "The funding's dried up." I didn't understand. Didn't understand what? That real innovation comes from respect, from giving credit where it's due. He paused. From actually knowing how to build something, not just how to take credit for it. I thought about the young developers at his company, people who'd faced the same dismissal and disrespect I had. "Send me their contact information," I said. "Oracle's building a new development team for Guardian's expansion. We need people who understand both code and ethics." Later that evening, I visited Nexus's former headquarters, now mostly empty as the company faced bankruptcy and criminal investigations. Kane had been indicted for fraud. The board had resigned in disgrace. The military contract had been canceled. But in the parking lot, I saw a familiar face. Jimmy Chen, a junior developer who'd always supported my work at Nexus. "Mr. Thompson," he called out. "Or should I say Mr. CTO? I smiled. "Just Marcus is fine. How are you holding up?" "Actually, amazing. After Guardian exposed Kane, we junior developers formed a coalition, started documenting everything. Turns out Kane had stolen code from dozens of us. He showed me his phone, a website where developers were sharing their stories, supporting each other, demanding recognition for their work. We're calling it the Guardian Protocol," Jimmy grinned. "A way to protect developers' rights and expose theft. You inspired it." I looked at the website, remembering all the times I'd seen talented developers pushed aside, their work stolen, their contributions erased. "Send me the link," I said. Oracle's new ethics board might be interested in supporting this. My phone buzzed again, Amanda this time. After the scandal, Google had launched an internal investigation into code attribution. She'd been asked to step down pending review. "I get it now," she texted. "Why you stayed in development instead of chasing titles. Real power isn't in taking credit. It's in creating something that matters." At home, I opened my laptop, the same one I'd used to write Guardian's first lines of code. On my screen, the system hummed quietly, protecting networks across the globe. But its real impact wasn't in the cyber attacks it prevented or the billions it was worth. Its real impact was in the changes it had sparked. new industry standards for code attribution, stronger protections for developers' rights, a growing movement demanding respect for the people who actually build the technology that powers our world. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Trevor, my youngest cousin who'd mocked my career at the reunion. "Starting coding classes next week," he wrote. "Think you could mentor me? I want to learn how to build something real." I smiled, remembering my own journey from underestimated developer to industry changemaker. Lesson 1, I replied. Success isn't about who takes credit. It's about who does the work, and about protecting what you build. Outside my window, the Silicon Valley sunset painted the sky in shades of possibility. Tomorrow, I would start my new role at Oracle. Next week, I would testify before Congress about protecting developers' rights. Next month, the Guardian Protocol would launch globally. But tonight, I opened a new project file on my laptop. Another idea, another innovation, another chance to prove that real power in tech isn't about titles or theft or corporate politics. It's about writing code that matters, code that protects, code that reveals truth. And sometimes, it's about showing the world that the developers they underestimate today might just revolutionize their industry tomorrow. After all, every line of code tells a story. Mine just happened to change everything. Are you having a mental breakdown? Michael Torres, my direct supervisor at Anderson and Pierce Financial, stared at me like I just announced I was moving to Mars. You want to quit your VP position to sell tacos? I sat across from him in the glass-walled office on the 47th floor of downtown Los Angeles, the morning sun casting long shadows across his mahogany desk. My resignation letter lay between us, crisp white paper against dark wood. Not just tacos, I said, keeping my voice steady. Traditional Mexican street food. My grandmother's recipes. Michael leaned back in his leather chair, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. Sophia, you make $200,000 a year. Your bonus last quarter was bigger than most people's annual salary. And you want to throw it all away for street food? My name is Sophia Reyes, and until that moment, I'd spent 8 years climbing the corporate ladder at one of LA's most prestigious financial firms. I had the corner office, the designer suits, the respect of my peers. Everything I thought I wanted when I graduated from Stanford Business School. Everything except happiness. I've made my decision, I said, standing up. My last day will be in 2 weeks. Michael shook his head. At least take some time to think about it. Maybe a vacation. I've thought about it for months. I straightened my blazer. A $2,000 piece of armor I wouldn't need much longer. Thank you for everything, Michael. As I walked back to my office, whispers followed. News traveled fast in corporate settings, especially news this bizarre. A VP of financial strategy leaving to start a food truck. It had to be a joke. By lunchtime, my inbox was flooded with messages from colleagues, ranging from concerned to condescending. "Have you lost your mind?" wrote Sarah from marketing. "Midlife crisis hitting early," joked Brad from risk management. "Hope you like being poor," added James, my former mentor. I closed my email and looked out my office window at the sprawling Los Angeles landscape below. Somewhere down there, my grandmother's small restaurant had once served the best Mexican food in the city. Before rising rents and changing demographics forced her to close, before she had to watch her life's work disappear. Mija, she told me on her deathbed 2 months ago, pressing a worn notebook into my hands. Promise me our recipes won't die with me. That notebook now sat in my desk drawer, its pages yellowed, but the handwriting still clear. Every recipe, every secret, every technique she'd learned from her mother and grandmother before her. 3 generations of culinary artistry waiting to be reborn. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Diana. They're taking bets on how long you'll last before coming back begging for your job. Office pool is up to $5,000. I smiled. Let them bet. They didn't know what I knew. What they saw: an impulsive decision, a career suicide, a prestigious position abandoned for a pipe dream. What they couldn't see: 18 months of careful planning. The business plan I developed using the same skills I applied to multi-million-dollar corporate strategies. The market research showing a growing demand for authentic, high-quality street food. The savings account containing enough to sustain me for 2 years. And most importantly, they didn't see the test runs I'd been doing every weekend for the past year. Selling my grandmother's recipes at farmers markets under the name Abuela's Street Kitchen. They didn't know that I was already turning a profit, that I had a loyal following, that people drove from other cities just to taste our food. I pulled out my grandmother's notebook, running my fingers over the worn cover. Inside, along with the recipes, was a black and white photo from 1962. My grandmother standing proudly in front of her first restaurant, Rai's Authentic Mexican Kitchen. "I'll make you proud, Abuela," I whispered. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of handover meetings and exit interviews. My colleagues alternated between treating me like I had terminal illness and making jokes about my future career serving corporate dropouts their lunch. On my last day, I cleared out my office while wearing jeans and a t-shirt. A small act of rebellion against 8 years of formal business attire. As I packed my awards and certificates into a box, Michael appeared in my doorway. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "The position's yours until end of day." I shook my head. "I appreciate everything I've learned here, Michael, but this is something I need to do." He sighed. "Well, when it doesn't work out, give me a call, though I can't guarantee you'll come back at the same level." "Thank you," I said, not bothering to argue. "But I won't be coming back." As I walked through the office for the last time, carrying my box of belongings, I heard snickers and whispered comments. "There goes her career. Wonder how long before she regrets this. Have fun being poor." The last comment came from James, loud enough to ensure I heard it. I stopped and turned to face him, smiling. "You know what, James? I will have fun, because unlike you, I won't spend the next 20 years wondering what if." The elevator doors closed on his stunned expression, and just like that, my corporate career was over. But my real journey was just beginning. The following Monday, instead of putting on a power suit and heading to my climate-controlled office, I drove to a warehouse in East LA. Inside waited my investment in the future, a fully equipped food truck, gleaming silver in the early morning light. I'd spent the past month working with a custom food truck builder, designing every detail: state-of-the-art cooking equipment, efficient storage systems, and a service window large enough to let customers watch their food being prepared, just like they used to at my grandmother's restaurant. The exterior featured hand-painted artwork, vibrant colors, traditional Mexican designs, and my grandmother's portrait watching over everything. Above it all, in bold letters, Abuela's Street Kitchen, authentic Mexican soul food. "Looking good, Jefa," called out Miguel, my first employee. He'd been my grandmother's sous chef for 15 years before her restaurant closed. Now at 62, he was ready to help bring her recipes back to life. "Ready for this?" I asked, unlocking the truck. He grinned, tying on his apron. "Been ready for years. Just waiting for you to realize this is where you belong." We spent that first morning prep cooking, following my grandmother's precise instructions. The marinades had to be made fresh daily. The salsas needed specific chili combinations. Every tortilla would be hand-pressed moments before cooking. By 11:30 a.m., we were parked in our designated spot near a cluster of office buildings in downtown Leh, the same area where I used to spend $20 on mediocre salads for lunch. "Think anyone will come?" Miguel asked as we finished our final preparations. I checked my phone, pulling up the Instagram account I'd been building for months. The post announcing our location had over 500 likes. "They'll come." And they did. By noon, we had a line stretching around the corner. Word had spread through social media and the local foodie community. Everyone wanted to try the corporate VP turned food truck chef. I worked the window while Miguel handled the grill, greeting each customer personally, explaining the dishes, sharing stories about the recipes. Every plate that went out was a piece of my heritage, my grandmother's legacy. "Holy shit," breathed a man in an expensive suit after biting into our signature birria taco. "This is better than any Mexican food I've had in LA." "Tell your friends," I smiled, already preparing the next order. By 2 p.m., we'd sold out completely. My feet ached, my hair smelled like cooking oil, and my once manicured hands were stained with adobo sauce. I had never been happier. As we cleaned up for the day, Miguel nudged me. "Look who's here." I turned to see James and a group from Anderson and Pierce, standing across the street, staring at our truck with a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. They'd probably expected to find me struggling, maybe even regretting my decision. Instead, they saw a sold-out food truck and a line of disappointed customers asking when we'd be back tomorrow. I waved at them, genuine smile on my face. James turned away quickly, herding his group back toward their office. That evening, as I counted our first day's earnings, nearly triple what I'd projected, my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Office is buzzing. Someone posted a review of your food on the company Slack. They can't believe it's actually good." I laughed, then opened my grandmother's notebook to review tomorrow's prep list. On the inside cover, she'd written a message I'd never noticed before. "Success isn't about where you work, Mija. It's about putting your heart into what you do." As I planned out our next day's menu, I realized something. For the first time in my career, I wasn't watching the clock or dreading Monday mornings. I was excited to get up and work, eager to serve each customer, proud of every dish we created. They thought I was crazy to leave a 6-figure job for a food truck. But what they didn't understand was that some dreams are worth more than a steady paycheck. And this was just the beginning. 3 months after leaving Anderson and Pierce, I sat at my small home office desk reviewing our numbers. The laptop screen glowed in the early morning darkness, spreadsheets replacing the financial models I once created for billion-dollar corporations. But these numbers told a different story, one of exponential growth. Abuela's street kitchen had not just survived, it had exploded. Our daily revenue was triple my initial projections. We'd added a second truck within the first month, then a third 6 weeks later. Each one consistently sold out. My phone buzzed, a message from Louis, my newest hire, running truck number 3. Line already forming at USC. Students spreading the word about the breakfast burritos. I smiled, remembering how my grandmother used to say good food doesn't need advertising. Word of mouth was our only marketing, yet each location had regulars who showed up daily, bringing friends, sharing photos on social media. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in." Diana walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. After seeing our success, she'd quit her own corporate job to help manage our growing operation. "You need to see this," she said, setting down the coffee and pulling up something on her phone. "Someone just posted about us on LA Food Scene's Instagram." The post showed our original truck, line wrapped around the block. From corporate DP to food truck queen. How Sophia Reyes is revolutionizing LA's street food scene. Not just authentic Mexican food, but a powerful story of choosing passion over prestige. "That's not all," Diana continued, scrolling. 3 major food festivals want us as featured vendors. The LA Times wants to do a profile. And she paused for effect. The Food Network called. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about how much had changed in just 3 months. We now had 15 employees, all paid above industry standard with health benefits, something I'd insisted on from the start. Many were family members of former workers from my grandmother's restaurant, carrying on her legacy of authentic cuisine. "There's something else," Diana said, her tone shifting. "Anderson and Pierce's new building, the one they're moving to next month, they want us to be the primary lunch vendor in their corporate plaza." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You're kidding." "Got the email this morning. Apparently, half their employees have been walking 6 blocks to catch our trucks." Management finally caved. The irony was almost too perfect. The same company that had mocked my decision now wanted to partner with us. My phone buzzed again. "Miguel. Need to talk. Supply issue with the tortilla masa. Vendor can't keep up with our volume." And there it was, the daily reminder that success brings its own challenges. We'd grown so fast that our suppliers were struggling to meet our demand for the high-quality, specific ingredients my grandmother's recipes required. "One problem at a time," I muttered, pulling up our vendor contacts. "Call everyone for a team meeting at 2 p.m. We need to discuss expansion strategy." By noon, I was at our commissary kitchen, a space we'd rented for prep work and storage. The energy was electric as our prep teams worked, music playing, aromas of chilies and spices filling the air. "Chefa," called out Carmen, our head prep cook. "Come taste this new salsa verde. I added episode like your grandmother's notes suggested." I sampled the salsa, closing my eyes as flavors exploded across my tongue. "Perfect. Abuela would be proud." "Sophia." Diana rushed in, waving her phone. "You need to see what's happening downtown." She pulled up a live Instagram story. James, my former mentor from Anderson and Pierce, was doing a walking food review. He stood in line at our truck, speaking to the camera. "Yes, this is the same food truck started by my former VP," he said, trying to sound casual. "The one we all thought was crazy." Well, he held up a half-eaten birria taco. "I hate to admit it, but this might be the best decision she ever made. This food is incredible." The comments were flowing. "Wait, a VP quit to start this. Best tacos in LA. Can't believe corporate didn't see this coming." "He's been in line 3 times this week," Diana grinned. "Pretty sure he's becoming a regular." The afternoon team meeting filled our small office space. 15 people crammed in, each bringing updates and challenges. The USC location is overwhelming. Truck 3, Lewis reported. Students are trying to pre-order through Instagram. Downtown wants us to add breakfast service, added Elena from Truck 2. They're offering to fast-track the permits. Our tortilla supplier can't scale up, Miguel confirmed. Says they need new equipment to meet our volume. I looked around the room at these people who'd taken a chance on my vision. Some had left stable jobs. Others had come out of retirement. All believed in bringing my grandmother's recipes to a new generation. Okay, I said, pulling out my grandmother's notebook. Let's solve this one step at a time. First, the supply issue. Miguel, remember how Abuela used to make tortillas? He grinned. In-house, old-school method. What if we did that? Convert part of the commissary into a tortilla production facility. Diana was already calculating. Initial equipment cost would be high, but we control quality and supply chain. Do it, I decided. Get bids for the equipment. Next, expansion. We're turning away too much business. Time to add trucks 4 and 5. Luis, Alina, start recruiting and training teams. What about the Anderson and Pierce offer? Diana asked. The room went quiet. Everyone knew the story of my departure. I smiled. Tell them we'll consider it, at premium pricing, and we want Signage telling our story. As the meeting wrapped up, I held up my grandmother's notebook. One more thing. Next week marks what would have been Abuela's 80th birthday. In her honor, we're doing something special. I outlined my plan. One day of original menu prices from her 1962 restaurant. Every truck would serve her signature dishes exactly as she made them. We'd lose money that day, but it wasn't about profit. Start promoting it tomorrow, I told Diana. Let's show Lily what real Mexican soul food means. That evening, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the commissary kitchen. The space still smelled of chiles and spices, echoing with the day's energy. My phone showed missed calls from 3 different restaurant groups wanting to discuss partnerships. The Food Network had emailed again about a possible show. A major business magazine wanted to profile the VP who traded Wall Street for street food. I opened my grandmother's notebook, finding a photo of her in front of her first restaurant. Next to it, I'd pinned a recent photo of our first food truck, lines of people waiting eagerly. Did you know, Abuela? I whispered. Did you know this is what would happen when you gave me these recipes? A new message popped up, a customer review with a photo. Brought my Abuela here today. She cried because it reminded her of home. Thank you for keeping traditions alive. I wiped tears from my eyes, then started planning tomorrow's menu. Because success isn't just about profits or headlines. It's about honoring where you come from while building something new. And we were just getting started. 1 year after walking away from my 6-figure corporate job, I stood on the rooftop of our new headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. The morning sun glinted off a fleet of 20 food trucks in the parking lot below, each bearing the now famous Abuela's Street Kitchen logo. The numbers are in, Diana said, joining me at the railing. Last month's revenue hit $4.2 million. The valuation report puts us at just over $50 million. I smiled, remembering James's mocking words. Have fun being poor. Anderson and Pierce's current market cap was $42 million, and they were struggling. Turned out their new building's food court, which they'd hoped would feature our trucks, remained empty. We declined their offer, instead opening our own brick-and-mortar restaurant just 2 blocks away. The Wall Street Journal piece just dropped. Diana held up her phone. Want to read it? The headline caught my eye. From corporate dropout to culinary empire. How one woman's food truck revolution is reshaping the industry. But before I could read more, Miguel burst through the roof access door. Sophia, you need to come see this. We followed him down to the test kitchen, where our development team worked on new recipes and trained staff. A crowd had gathered around one of the prep stations. In the center stood Carmen, tears streaming down her face, holding her phone on video chat. On the screen, I recognized her grandmother, one of my grandmother's oldest friends. Senora Maria. I pushed forward. What's wrong? The elderly woman was also crying, but smiling. Sofia Maniga. I just saw your trucks in Mexico City. My grandson sent me pictures. Your abuela's recipes, her legacy. It's come home. My heart skipped. Our international expansion had started 3 months ago, carefully selecting partners who would maintain our standards and traditions. Mexico City was our first location outside the U.S., and it meant everything to honor the cuisine's origins. 20 trucks in Mexico City, Diana whispered. All sold out by 2 p.m. their first day. I touched the screen gently. Senora Maria, those recipes, they're your history too. All of yours. I looked around at our staff, many of them children and grandchildren of my grandmother's original restaurant workers. This success belongs to all of us. The afternoon brought another surprise. A sleek black car pulled up to our headquarters, and out stepped Michael Torres, my former supervisor from Anderson and Pierce. Sophia, he called out as I met him in the lobby. Got a minute? We sat in my office, not a glass-walled corporate showpiece, but a warm space filled with family photos and cooking awards. My grandmother's original notebook sat in a glass display case on the wall, next to her first restaurant sign. I'll be direct, Michael said, looking uncomfortable. I'm leaving Anderson and Pierce. The company's downsizing. And he hesitated. I was hoping to discuss opportunities here. I leaned back in my chair, remembering his words from a year ago. When it doesn't work out, give me a call. What kind of opportunities did you have in mind? He straightened his tie. I have 20 years of corporate finance experience. Your company's growing exponentially. You need someone to manage that growth. Actually, I smiled. We have someone amazing handling our finances. I pressed the intercom. Diana, can you join us? Diana walked in, recognition flashing across her face. Hello, Michael. You remember Diana Martinez? My former colleague who everyone said was throwing away her career to join a food truck business. She's our CFO now. Just closed our series of funding round. Very successfully. Michael's face fell slightly. I see. Well, perhaps there are other positions. We're always hiring line cooks, I said kindly. Starting pay is $25 an hour, full benefits, profit sharing. We believe in valuing everyone who contributes to our success. He stood up quickly. I should go. Congratulations on everything, Sophia. You proved us all wrong. After he left, Diana burst out laughing. Did you see his face? Remember when he said you'd be serving corporate dropouts their lunch? Now we're employing them instead. The next morning, I arrived early at our flagship restaurant, the same location where my grandmother's original place had stood. We bought the building 6 months ago, renovating it to match her old photos while adding modern touches. Inside, prep teams were already working. The tortilla facility hummed next door, producing thousands of fresh tortillas daily. Upstairs, our culinary training program was in session, teaching new employees not just cooking skills, but the history behind each dish. My phone buzzed. A message from our Mexico City partner. Lines around the block again. When can we add more trucks? Before I could reply, Diana rushed in. Sophia, you need to turn on CNBC right now. We huddled around the office TV as the business news anchor spoke. In a surprising turn of events, Anderson and Pierce Financial announced major layoffs today as their stock hit a 5-year low. Meanwhile, former VP Sophia Rice's Abuela's Kitchen empire continues its explosive growth. Sources value the company at over $50 million. With international expansion accelerating, they cut to a clip of James, my former mentor, being interviewed outside Anderson and Pierce's building. Looking back, he said, looking tired. We were too focused on traditional metrics. We missed the bigger picture. Sophia saw where the real opportunity was. She didn't just start a food business, she created a movement. I turned off the TV, thinking about how much had changed in 1 year. We now employed over 200 people across our operations. Our culinary training program was sending graduates to top restaurants nationwide. We'd launched a foundation to help other immigrant-owned food businesses preserve their traditional recipes and methods. Sophia, Miguel called from the kitchen. Come taste this. He stood at the prep station, an old photo propped up next to him. In it, he and my grandmother worked side by side in her original kitchen. I found another note in her recipe files, he said, stirring a pot of something that smelled incredible, a variation of the birria she never got to try. I tasted it, closing my eyes as flavors danced across my tongue. It's perfect. Put it on tomorrow's special board. Call it Abuela's Dream. Later that evening, after the dinner rush, I sat in my grandmother's old office, now restored to look just as it had in the 60s. Her notebooks filled a shelf, their wisdom still guiding us. But next to them sat new notebooks, filled with our own innovations and adaptations. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. A young woman stood there, nervous but determined. Ms. Reyes? I just quit my consulting job to start a Korean food truck. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but I was hoping I could get your advice. I smiled, gesturing for her to sit down. Let me tell you a story about choosing passion over prestige. My phone buzzed again. Forbes this time, wanting to feature us in their 30 Under 30 issue. Diana poked her head in with more updates. 3 new cities requesting franchise rights, a potential TV deal, and a major food supplier wanting to partner on our sauces and marinades. But those could wait. Right now, I had a different priority: helping another dreamer find the courage to bet on herself. Because success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about proving that when you honor your heritage, trust your instincts, and refuse to let others define your worth, anything is possible. As I looked out at our busy restaurant, watched our trucks return from another successful day, and thought about all the lives we touched, I knew my grandmother would be proud. Not just of the empire we built, but of how we built it. With heart, with authenticity, and with a commitment to lifting others as we rose. The corporate world had laughed when I chose a food truck over a corner office. Now they were studying our business model, trying to understand how a simple food truck had transformed into a $50 million enterprise in just 1 year. But I knew the secret wasn't in the business metrics. It was in every handmade tortilla, every family recipe, every employee who felt valued, and every customer who tasted not just food, but tradition, love, and the courage to follow your dreams. Have fun being poor, they'd said. I was having fun all right, building something far richer than money could measure. And this was still just the beginning. The private reading of my father's will took place in the same mahogany-lined office where I'd spent countless evenings managing the Harrison family's complex financial empire. My stepmother Victoria sat perfectly poised in her designer morning clothes, while her son Bradley lounged with the practiced indifference of someone who'd never worked for his money. I took my usual seat, the one I'd occupied for 7 years, as the family's private financial manager. The laptop in my bag contained enough secrets to destroy them all, but they'd never bothered to consider that. To them, I was just James Harrison's daughter from his first marriage. The quiet one, the reliable one, the one who helped with the books. Before we begin, Victoria announced, smoothing her silk skirt, I think Abigail should wait outside. Martin Walsh, Dad's longtime attorney, frowned. As James's daughter, she has every right. As his employee, Victoria cut in, she should respect the family's privacy during this sensitive moment. I met her eyes, remembering all the late nights I'd spent hiding her expensive shopping trips from Dad's scrutiny. All the creative accounting that kept her secret accounts growing while she played the dutiful wife. I'll stay, I said quietly. Bradley snorted. Did you miss the part about family privacy? Did you miss the part where I'm actually related to Dad by blood? I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Unlike some people. Victoria's perfectly maintained smile tightened. Now, dear, there's no need for unpleasantness. We all know James thought of Bradley as his own son. Yes, he did. Right up until the end, when the morphine made him confused enough to start talking about things he'd discovered. Things involving missing funds and duplicate accounts. Things that had made Victoria's visits to the hospital become suddenly more frequent and attentive. Let's proceed, Martin said, opening a thick folder. The majority of James Harrison's estate, including the family business and primary residences, will be managed through the Harrison Family Trust. I noticed Victoria's slight relaxation. She'd gotten what she wanted. The trust will be administered solely for the benefit of Victoria Harrison and Bradley Wells Harrison, Martin continued, his voice carrying a hint of disapproval, with Victoria serving as primary trustee. And there it was, 7 years of managing their finances, of protecting their secrets, of building their wealth, and I was being cut out completely. There are some smaller personal bequests, Martin added. Abigail will receive her mother's jewelry collection and a sum off. We can handle the details later, Victoria interrupted. I think we should discuss the transition of financial oversight. Abigail has been handling those duties, but obviously that arrangement will need to change. Obviously, because you can't have the hired help knowing too much about the family finances, even if that hired help spent years building the very structures that protected their wealth. Of course, I said, opening my laptop. I'll prepare a complete transfer of all accounts I directly manage, though you might want to review certain arrangements first. Victoria's smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. Arrangements? The offshore accounts, for instance. I pulled up a spreadsheet. I assume you'll want those handled with particular discretion. Bradley sat up straighter. What offshore accounts? The ones your mother opened in 2019, I replied casually. Starting with the Cayman Islands Foundation and expanding through various shell companies in Panama, Singapore, and Luxembourg. I glanced at Victoria. Would you like me to continue? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. Those accounts are confidential, she said, her voice tight. They are, I agreed. Very confidential, especially the transfers that began 3 months before Dad's cancer diagnosis. Martin shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No need. Victoria cut in quickly. Abigail is simply being thorough, as always. We can handle the transition details later. But I wasn't finished. Not after years of swallowing their condescension, of being treated like a servant in my own father's house. There's also the matter of the art collection, I continued, pulling up another file. The pieces purchased through the Gallery Romano Front Company. Interesting how their declared values for insurance differ from their reported values for tax purposes. Bradley's practiced indifference vanished. Mother? And of course, I added, the real estate holdings in your maiden name. The ones that somehow never made it into Dad's asset disclosures during his last refinancing. Victoria stood abruptly. That's enough. Martin, we'll continue this another time, without unnecessary personnel present. I closed my laptop slowly, deliberately. You know, Victoria, it's interesting that you never asked why Dad kept me managing the family finances all these years. Never wondered why he trusted his hired help with so much responsibility. Because you're good with numbers, she snapped. A useful skill for an employee. No, I corrected her. Because I inherited something more valuable than his money. I inherited his caution, his attention to detail, his understanding that true power isn't about having wealth, it's about knowing how to protect it. I stood, gathering my things. But you're right, the trust is for real family members. I'll begin transitioning the accounts tomorrow. Wait. Victoria's voice had lost its aristocratic certainty. Perhaps we should discuss this further. Why? I asked innocently. I wouldn't want to overstep my position as, what did you call it? Unnecessary personnel? Bradley was looking between his mother and me, finally beginning to understand that something was very wrong. The transition can wait, Victoria said quickly. We should take time to review everything properly. Oh, I agree. I headed for the door. In fact, I think we should review everything, every account, every transfer, every creative bit of accounting I've done over the years to keep certain activities private. Martin cleared his throat. Miss Harrison, if there are irregularities in the family accounts. There aren't, Victoria interrupted sharply. Abigail is simply being thorough. I paused at the door. You know what Dad told me in the hospital, right before he died. He said, the best leverage isn't what you take, it's what you know. Victoria's face went perfectly still. I'll see you tomorrow, I continued pleasantly. We can discuss the trust arrangements then, along with everything else. Walking out, I heard Bradley's confused voice. Mother, what exactly does she mean about the Cayman accounts? I smiled, thinking about the encrypted files on my laptop. About 7 years of documented transactions and creative financial arrangements. About all the secrets Victoria thought were safely hidden behind my hired help status. Dad had taught me well. True power isn't always about having your name on the trust. Sometimes it's about being the one person who knows where all the bodies are buried. And Victoria was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The Harrison family's private banking room at First Maritime Trust still felt like my domain. I'd spent years here, building the financial labyrinth that protected their wealth and their secrets. Now, watching Victoria and Bradley fidget in their expensive clothes, I savored the shift in power. As you can see, I explained, projecting a complex diagram onto the wall, the family's financial structure is intricate. Victoria's eyes darted between the dozens of connected entities, trusts, and offshore accounts. Her usual imperious expression had given way to barely concealed panic. "This is ridiculous," Bradley interrupted. "We don't need all these details. Just transfer everything to our new financial team." I smiled. Of course. Though they might have questions about certain transactions, like the $8 million that moved through 6 different shells before landing in your mother's private account in Singapore. Victoria's perfectly manicured hand tightened around her designer purse. That money was a gift from James. Really? I pulled up another document, because the transfer documents show it came from the company's environmental compliance budget. Right after Dad started asking questions about chemical disposal at the Milwaukee plant. Bradley's face went pale. "Mother, it's not what you think," Victoria said quickly. "James knew about all of this. He approved." "No," I cut in softly. "He didn't. That's why you increased his morphine doses whenever he started talking about the accounts. Isn't that right?" The banking room fell silent except for the soft hum of my laptop. Even Bradley looked shocked. My phone buzzed. A message from Diane at the SEC. "Documents received. Initial review confirms irregularities." "Shall we continue?" I asked pleasantly. "We haven't even gotten to the art collection yet. Those pieces you bought with company funds, but reported as charitable donations." Victoria stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. We'll have our lawyers." "Your lawyers might be interested in this too." I switched to another document. "The retainer payments from the family trust to firms that don't exist. 5 years of fake legal fees funneling into your private accounts. You helped set those up," she snapped. "You're implicated too." "Am I?" I opened a folder marked Insurance. "Because I have 7 years of detailed memos to Dad documenting my concerns about these arrangements. Memos you intercepted and deleted from his email, but not, unfortunately, from my encrypted backups." Bradley slumped in his chair. "Jesus Christ, Mother." "Oh, don't act so innocent." Victoria turned on him. "Where do you think your gambling debts disappeared to? Those mysterious payments to your bookies in Vegas?" I pulled up another spreadsheet. Speaking of gambling debts, the casino payments were actually the simple part. The money laundering through the offshore sports betting sites was much more creative. Bradley's face went from pale to green. "You knew about that?" "I know everything," I said quietly. "Every transaction, every cover-up, every little financial maneuver you both thought was so cleverly hidden." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "What do you want?" "Want?" I feigned surprise. "I'm just being thorough in the transition. As an employee, I have a duty to ensure all accounts are properly disclosed." "Name your price," she hissed. "Half the trust?" "Fine. We can rewrite." "The trust?" I laughed. "You still think this is about money?" My phone buzzed again. "Diana, enforcement team ready when you give the word." "This," I continued, gesturing to the screen full of damning financial data, "is about 7 years of being treated like a servant in my own father's house. About watching you manipulate and steal from him, right up until his death." "We can fix this," Victoria said desperately. "Whatever you want." "What I want," I cut in, "is for you to understand exactly how badly you miscalculated. You thought I was just the hired help, the quiet daughter who was good with numbers. Never once wondering why Dad kept me so close to the family finances." I started shutting down my laptop. "In about an hour, the SEC will receive detailed documentation of every irregular transaction I've shown you today. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit already has copies." Victoria went very still. "You're bluffing." The same way you were bluffing about those environmental violations. Or about Dad's mental state when you hadn't changed his will. Bradley stood up so fast his chair toppled. You changed his will? Sit down, Victoria snapped. She's just trying to... To what? I asked. Tell the truth. Should we discuss the medical records you altered? The witnesses you paid off? The convenient timing of Dad's final morphine dose? The banking room's temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Even Victoria's perfect makeup couldn't hide her growing terror. You wouldn't, she whispered. You'll go down with us. All those transactions. You processed them. Under duress, I corrected. With detailed documentation of my protests. And with encrypted evidence of your threats when I tried to tell Dad the truth. My phone buzzed one final time. Diana, team's in position. Ready? I'll give you a choice, I said, standing. Option 1. You both resign as trustees immediately. A new independent trustee takes control with full audit authority. You live on modest stipends, far from any financial control. And option 2, Bradley asked weakly. I forward everything to the authorities. All of it. The fraud, the money laundering, the environmental cover-ups. I met Victoria's eyes. The medical records. Victoria's perfect facade finally shattered completely. You evil little. Careful, I warned. Remember who knows where all your bodies are buried. You planned this, she accused. All these years. You were planning this. No, I corrected her. I was just being thorough. Keeping detailed records, like any good employee should. I picked up my laptop. You have 1 hour to decide. Choose wisely. As I reached the door, Bradley called out, Did Dad know? About all of it? I turned back. He started figuring it out near the end. That's when Victoria increased his medication. But he did leave me one last message. What message? I smiled slightly. He said, The quiet ones see everything, and they never forget. Walking out of the bank, I thought about all the years of subtle humiliation. The constant reminders that I was just the help. The dismissal of my warnings about Victoria's schemes. They'd forgotten the first rule of power. Never underestimate the person who knows all your secrets. And now they had 1 hour to learn that lesson. Exactly 58 minutes after I left the bank, my phone rang. Martin Walsh's number. They've agreed, he said without preamble. Full resignation as trustees. But Victoria has conditions. I watched the sun setting over the city from my father's old office. Now my office. She's not in a position to make conditions. She wants immunity from any future investigations and a guaranteed monthly stipend. Put me on speaker, I said, hearing shuffling as he complied. Victoria, I want you to understand something. You're not negotiating anymore. You're surviving. Her voice came through, stripped of its usual aristocratic polish. You vindictive little. The SEC teams are waiting. I cut in. One word from me, and they move on everything. The fraud, the money laundering, the medical records, silence. So here's how this works, I continued. You both resign. Immediately, the independent trustee I've chosen takes control. You live on the stipends we decide, in the properties we allow, and you never, ever attempt to access or influence the family finances again. And if we refuse, Bradley's voice shook slightly. I pressed a button on my phone. Diana, is the SEC team still in position? Ready on your signal, My longtime friend at the Securities and Exchange Commission replied. FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is standing by too. I let them absorb that. Your choice. But choose quickly. You have 90 seconds. The silence stretched for 45 agonizing seconds before Victoria spoke. We accept. Both of you? Yes, Bradley answered quickly. Both of us. Good. Martin, execute the papers. I've already had them drawn up. I paused, then added, and Victoria? Leave Dad's wedding ring. The one you took from the hospital before they called me. Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd been right about that too. 24 hours later, I sat in the main conference room of Harrison Industries, facing the board of directors. The same people who'd fawned over Victoria for years now sat in stunned silence as I laid out the changes. The company will undergo a full audit, I explained. Every transaction, every account, every decision of the past 7 years will be reviewed. But the publicity, one director began, is already handled. I finished. A press release goes out tomorrow announcing a voluntary corporate governance review. The markets will see it as responsible oversight, not desperation. Another director cleared his throat. And Victoria's position as chairwoman is terminated, effective immediately. I slid forward a thick folder, along with any board member who knowingly participated in her financial manipulations. I have documentation of who knew what and when. Choose your next moves carefully. 3 directors stood and left without a word. Smart ones. The others would learn soon enough. By evening, the reshaping of Harrison Industries was well underway. Bradley had been removed from his executive position. Victoria's loyalists were clearing out their offices, and Dad's old partners, the ones she'd forced out years ago, were already calling to discuss returning. I found Victoria waiting in my office as I finished the day's meetings. I have nothing left to say to you, I told her, moving to call security. Just one thing, she said, placing Dad's wedding ring on my desk. Why did you wait so long? You had this evidence for years. Why let us hang ourselves? I sat down, picking up the ring. Because Dad taught me that true justice isn't just about punishment. It's about giving people enough rope to reveal who they really are. She flinched. James never understood. He understood everything. I cut in. At the end, when the morphine doses weren't quite high enough to keep him confused, he asked me to protect his legacy, not just from you, but from what it had become. And now, a trace of her old derision crept back. You'll run everything? The quiet little bookkeeper becomes the queen. I smiled, remembering Dad's last lucid words. Actually, no. I'm appointing a professional management team, independent oversight, total transparency. Then what was the point? The point? I stood, fingering Dad's ring. The point was justice. For him. For the company he built. For every person you staked on climbing to the top. I met her eyes. And yes, for the hired help you never thought would matter. She turned to leave, then paused. The offshore accounts. The evidence. You really would have exposed everything. Check your phone, I replied. She did, and her face went ashen. Every major financial news site was running the story. Harrison Industries announces major governance reform. The subheading mentioned voluntary leadership changes and enhanced oversight measures. That version, I explained, lets you save face. The other version, the one with all the criminal details, is ready to go if you ever try to interfere again. You're more like me than you think, she said bitterly. No, I held up Dad's ring. I'm like him. I just learned to play your game better than you did. After she left, I sat in Dad's old chair, looking at the photos on his desk. Not the formal corporate ones Victoria had favored, but the real ones. Dad teaching me accounting at the kitchen table. Us reviewing his first company's books together. The day I graduated with my finance degree. The quiet ones see everything, he'd always said, and they never forget. My phone buzzed. Diana from the SEC. Reforms look good. Prosecutors stand down. Yes, I replied, as long as they behave. Later that night, as I left the office, I passed Bradley clearing out his desk. He looked up, years of practiced arrogance replaced by something like understanding. He'd be proud of you, he said quietly. The way you protected everything. Not everything, I corrected him. Just what mattered. The truth. The legacy. The principle. And the money. I smiled. Money's just power, Bradley. The real victory is in knowing how to use it. The next morning, the business world awakened to a transformed Harrison Industries. Transparent, ethical, professional, everything Dad had wanted it to be. Victoria and Bradley would live comfortably, but quietly, their stipends dependent on their continued good behavior. The offshore accounts were closed, their contents redirected to corporate philanthropy. The environmental violations were self-reported and corrected. And me? I kept Dad's old office, but mostly as a reminder. A reminder that true power isn't about having your name on a trust or your title on a door. It's about knowing when to be quiet, when to watch, and when to finally show your cards. Victoria had taught me that lesson, though not in the way she'd intended. She thought keeping me close but subordinate would ensure my loyalty. Instead, it had given me the perfect vantage point to document every mistake, every crime, every betrayal. Dad's ring now sat on my desk, next to a new photo, him and me at my college graduation, both of us smiling at some private joke. The quiet ones, watching and waiting. And in the end, that patience had revealed a truth Victoria never understood. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one holding the power. It's the one quietly documenting who's misusing it. They say money can't buy class, but Victoria Marshall was determined to prove otherwise. Standing in her designer wedding dress that cost more than my car, she'd orchestrated what she called the society event of the season. Funny how quickly my father's modest country club wedding had transformed into a showcase of excess once she took over the planning. My name is Olivia Bennett, and until 6 months ago, I was the VP of Commercial Lending at First Capital Bank, the same bank that was about to fund my father and his new wife's dream business venture. Life has a way of coming full circle, especially when people forget who you really are. I still remember the day Dad met Victoria at his hardware store. She'd walked in looking for authentic vintage tools to decorate her luxury real estate office. Back then, she'd been perfectly pleasant, even complimenting my financial expertise when Dad proudly mentioned my banking career. A banker? How? Practical, she'd said with that same smile she'd later used to cut me down at every opportunity. What changed? Simple. She discovered I wasn't just any banker. I was the daughter of the man she intended to marry. Suddenly, my career was quaint and limited. After all, in Victoria's world, women of status didn't work in finance. They ran charities and planned galas. Darling, she'd say to Dad, loud enough for me to hear, isn't it time Olivia found something more suitable? The banking world is so harsh for a young woman. Dad would just nod, already caught in her spell. My strong-willed father, who'd raised me alone after Mom died, who'd encouraged me to pursue my dreams in finance, was slowly transforming into Victoria's puppet. The wedding planning became her weapon of choice. Every decision, every detail was calculated to remind me of my place, or rather, the place she thought I deserved. The seating chart is rather complicated, she'd say during planning meetings. We have the governor's wife attending and several state senators. We need to be selective about table assignments. I watched my place card move further and further from the main tables, until finally, a week before the wedding, I overheard her talking to her wedding planner. Put Olivia in the kitchen entrance. She'll understand. It's where the help usually sits. The help. That's what I'd become in my own father's wedding. The daughter he'd raised alone, who'd graduated top of her class, who'd become the youngest VP in First Capital's history, reduced to the help. But Victoria had made one crucial mistake. She'd been so busy orchestrating her perfect wedding that she'd forgotten to check who was handling her business loan application. 3 months ago, she convinced Dad to sell his hardware store, his pride and joy for 30 years, to fund their new venture, a high-end interior design and home staging business. Victoria's vintage ventures would cater to the elite circles she so desperately wanted to join. The loan application had landed on my desk through pure coincidence. I could have recused myself, should have probably, but curiosity made me read it, and what I read made my blood run cold. Victoria's previous business ventures weren't nearly as successful as she claimed. 3 failed companies in 5 years, each time leaving unpaid debts and angry investors. She'd hidden this from Dad, using her charm and a series of LLCs to mask her track record. I tried to tell him, tried to show him the evidence, but Victoria had already poisoned that well. Olivia's just jealous, she told him. She can't stand seeing you happy, seeing you succeed without her help. Dad had patted my hand like I was still a child. Sweetheart, I know change is hard, but Victoria knows what she's doing. This business will secure our future. Our future. As if the life we built together meant nothing. I'd approved the loan anyway, signed all the paperwork, dotted every I, crossed every T. Victoria had been triumphant, not even bothering to read the fine print. After all, why would she? She'd won. The morning of the wedding, I arrived early, wearing the simple blue dress that Victoria had deemed appropriate for my position. The country club was transformed into her vision of luxury. Crystal chandeliers, imported flowers, ice sculptures. I found my place card exactly where I'd expected. A small table near the kitchen doors, hidden behind a large floral arrangement. Far from Dad, far from the important guests. Victoria spotted me as she made her final rounds before the ceremony. Her smile was pure poison. "The kitchen's where you belong," she smirked, adjusting her diamond necklace. "Wouldn't want to embarrass the family." I nodded quietly and opened the banking app on my phone, the same app I'd helped design during my tenure at First Capital, the same app that gave me access to every loan approval in the system. Victoria floated away, secure in her victory, never noticing my small smile. She had no idea that while she'd been planning her perfect wedding, I'd been planning something too. You see, there's something they don't teach you in banking school. Timing is everything. And tomorrow morning, when Victoria and Dad returned from their honeymoon to start their new business venture, they'd learn that lesson the hard way. I topped my phone away and took my seat by the kitchen doors. In a few hours, Dad would say, "I do" to a woman who'd orchestrated my humiliation. In 24 hours, that same woman would discover that karma has a way of serving revenge on a silver platter. The wedding coordinator began herding guests to their seats. The orchestra struck up the first notes of the wedding march, and I sat quietly, watching it all unfold, knowing that sometimes the best revenge doesn't need an audience. After all, I'd learned from the best. Victoria had taught me that humiliation tastes sweetest when served cold, in front of an audience. Tomorrow, she'd learn what happens when you underestimate the help. The ceremony began, and I watched my father marry a woman who'd torn our relationship apart. But unlike Victoria, I knew something she didn't. This wedding wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The morning after the wedding dawned bright and clear. I sat in my home office, surrounded by documents that would soon shatter Victoria's perfect world. My laptop displayed First Capital Bank's loan management system, a system I'd helped build, and one that still held a few secrets known only to its architects. I took a sip of coffee and began my work. Victoria and Dad were somewhere over the Atlantic, heading to their luxury honeymoon in the Maldives. They had no idea that their dream business was about to crumble before it even began. My phone buzzed. A text from my colleague Michael in risk assessment. Just reviewed the loan docs like you asked. How did we miss these red flags? I smiled, remembering how carefully I'd structured everything. Send the report to compliance. I texted back. Standard protocol. The truth was, we hadn't missed anything. I just waited for the perfect moment to discover the irregularities in Victoria's loan application. Timing, as they say, is everything. My desk phone rang. Amanda Torres, head of compliance. Olivia? We have a situation with the Marshall Bennett loan approval. Oh? I kept my voice neutral, professional. What kind of situation? Major discrepancies in the business history section. 3 undisclosed bankruptcies, multiple defaulted loans. How did this get approved? I could hear her shuffling papers. And the collateral verification. The property she listed as security. It's already mortgaged to 2 other banks. That's concerning, I replied, fighting to keep the satisfaction from my voice. Have you flagged it for immediate review? Already done. Given the severity, we're initiating an emergency cancellation. The funds were scheduled for release tomorrow. But now they won't be, I finished. Standard procedure for fraudulent applications. Exactly. I'll need you to sign off on the cancellation since you were the approving officer. I opened the relevant form on my screen, my cursor hovering over the signature line. In this moment, I thought about Dad, about the hardware store he'd sold based on Victoria's promises, about the way he changed since meeting her. Sending the signed forms now, I said, clicking submit. Will you handle the notification, or should I? Given your personal connection, I'll handle it. The notification will go out first thing tomorrow when they return from their honeymoon. Perfect timing. Victoria would walk into her new office space, the one she'd already leased and furnished with Dad's money, only to find that her dream business was dead before it started. After hanging up, I pulled out a thick folder from my desk drawer. Inside were copies of every document Victoria thought she'd successfully hidden. Her previous business failures, the unpaid debts, the investors she'd swindled. I'd been collecting them for months, waiting for the right moment. My phone buzzed again, a message from Victoria's daughter, Sophia, who'd been just as cruel as her mother throughout the wedding planning. Mom's so excited about the business. She's already invited all her society friends to the grand opening next month. It's going to be amazing. I didn't respond. Let them plan. Let them dream. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people build their castles in the air. knowing you were about to show them it's all made of sand. The rest of the day passed in a blur of calculated moods. I forwarded Victoria's true business history to every high-end design magazine that had agreed to cover her grand opening. I sent anonymous tips to the society columnists she'd been courting. By the time she returned, her carefully constructed image would be in tatters. That evening, I visited Dad's old hardware store, now empty, the sold sign still hanging in the window. 30 years of honest business, of serving the community, gone because Victoria had convinced him to chase her upscale dreams. My phone lit up with a photo from their honeymoon, Dad and Victoria on a pristine beach, her massive diamond ring prominently displayed. The caption read, "Planning our empire from paradise. Hashtag business goals, hashtag new beginnings." If only she knew. The next morning, I arrived at work early, wanting to be there when everything fell apart. At precisely 9 a.m., the automated system sent out the loan cancellation notice. At 9:05, Victoria's dream officially died. I didn't have to wait long for the reaction. At 9:17, my phone exploded with notifications. First came Victoria's text. All pretense of civility gone. "What have you doing?" Then Sophia. "Mom's hysterical. Fix this now." At 9:25, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. Some conversations needed to happen in person. At 9:45, Victoria stormed into my office, her designer outfit slightly disheveled, her perfect makeup smeared by angry tears. Dad followed behind her, looking confused and angry. "You vindictive little," Victoria started, but I held up my hand. "Before you continue," I said calmly, "you should know that this meeting is being recorded as per bank policy. Now, how can I help you?" Victoria's face contorted with rage. "You know exactly what you did. You canceled our loan." "No," I corrected her, opening the compliance report on my screen. "The bank canceled your loan due to numerous undisclosed prior bankruptcies and fraudulent collateral claims. Would you like to discuss those?" Dad stepped forward, his face pale. "What bankruptcies? What fraud?" I turned my monitor so he could see. "Victoria's had 3 failed businesses in 5 years, Dad. Each time, she left behind unpaid debts and angry investors. The property she claimed to own free and clear. It's mortgaged to multiple banks." "She's lying." Victoria shrieked, but her voice held a note of panic. "The documentation is quite clear," I continued, my voice professional and detached. "Would you like to see the court records? Or perhaps the complaints filed by your previous investors?" Dad sank into a chair, the reality of what he'd done. What she'd convinced him to do, finally hitting home. "The store," he whispered. "I sold the store." "Yes," I said quietly. "You did." Victoria's composure cracked completely. "This is because of the wedding, isn't it? Because I put you in your place?" I smiled, the same small smile I'd worn at the wedding. "No, Victoria. This is because you committed loan fraud. The fact that you're an awful person is just a bonus. I'll report you," she threatened. "I'll have your job." "For what?" "Doing my job. Protecting the bank from fraud. Please go ahead. I'm sure the banking commission would be very interested in your business history." Dad looked between us, 30 years of business reputation crumbling before his eyes. Can we fix this?" "The loan? No. That's done. Your reputation after associating with a known fraudster." I pulled out a business card. "This is David Cohen, the best business attorney I know. You'll meet him." Victoria grabbed her designer bag, her hands shaking. "This isn't over." "Actually," I said, standing up. It is. Security will escort you out. Standard procedure for fraud cases. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at my door. Victoria's final humiliation would be walking through the bank's lobby, past the very society people she'd been so desperate to impress. Dad stayed behind, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, Dad, many times. But you didn't want to hear it from your practical daughter who works in that harsh banking world. He flinched at the words, Victoria's words, thrown back at him. The store, he began, is sold, I finished. But not all is lost. I pulled out another folder, my resignation letter from First Capital Bank, along with a business plan I'd spent months preparing. Remember how Mom always said we should open a second location? I asked softly. I've spent the last 6 months negotiating with investors. Real investors, Dad. Not society climbers playing business. His hands trembled as he opened the folder. We can start over, I said. The right way this time. No shortcuts, no get-rich-quick schemes. Just honest business, like you taught me. The security guards were leading Victoria through the lobby now. I could hear her protests echoing down the hallway. Dad looked at the business plan, then at me. Why? Because sometimes, I said, people need to lose everything to remember what really matters. Through my office window, I watched Victoria climb into her luxury car, her dream of social climbing via my father's hard work shattered. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone, it's about exposing who they really are. And sometimes the best revenge is rebuilding something better from the ashes of what was lost. 1 year can change everything. I stood in front of our new store, Bennett and Daughter Hardware and Home, watching the morning sun glint off the freshly painted sign. The grand opening was scheduled for 10 a.m., and already a small crowd had gathered. Inside, Dad was arranging the last display, making sure every tool was perfectly aligned. He'd spent weeks planning the layout, combining the best elements of his old store with modern touches I'd suggested. The result was something neither of us could have created alone. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Socialite Victoria Marshall faces federal charges in investment scheme. I allowed myself a small smile. Karma, it seems, has perfect timing. The past year had been a journey of reconstruction, not just of the business, but of relationships. After the loan cancellation debacle, Dad had filed for annulment, citing Victoria's fraud as grounds. The society pages had a field day with that one. Ready for this? Dad asked, joining me at the window. He looked younger somehow. The weight of Victoria's manipulation lifted from his shoulders. Born ready, I replied, using the same phrase I'd used as a kid when he'd first taught me to use a cash register. The story of Victoria's fraud had spread quickly through our small business community. But something unexpected had happened alongside the scandal. People rallied around Dad. His old customers, the ones who trusted him for decades, came forward with support. Thomas Green, the elderly carpenter who'd been coming to our store for 30 years, had been the first to approach us about investing in the new venture. Your father taught me everything I know about selecting wood, he'd said, writing out a check. Time to return the favor. Other local business owners followed, not with millions like Victoria had promised, but with honest investments from people who understood the value of integrity over flash. We found the new location, bigger than the old store, but still in the heart of the community, through one of Dad's longtime customers. The renovation had been a community effort, with local contractors offering their services at cost. The interior design, Nothing like Victoria's grand plans. Instead of crystal chandeliers and imported marble, we had warm wood finishes and practical layouts. The DIY workshop area I'd always dreamed of adding was ready for its first class next week. 10 minutes until opening, Dad said, checking his watch. Mom's old watch. The one he'd started wearing again after Victoria left. I nodded, remembering another opening day, 25 years ago. I'd been 5, standing proudly in front of the original store, wearing a tiny apron with Daddy's helper embroidered on it. The crowd outside had grown. I spotted familiar faces, loyal customers, local business owners, even some of my former colleagues from the bank who'd left after witnessing Victoria's meltdown. Michael from Risk Assessment had quit 2 months after me, tired of the corporate politics. Now he handled our books, bringing big bank expertise to our family business. At 9:58, I saw a familiar car pull into the parking lot. Victoria's daughter Sophia stepped out, looking different from the last time I'd seen her. Gone were the designer clothes and superior attitude. She walked hesitantly toward the entrance. Dad tensed beside me, but I touched his arm. "It's okay," I invited her. Sophia had reached out 3 months ago after Victoria's arrest. Her mother's schemes had left her jobless and humbled. She'd asked for a chance to apologize, to make amends. "Your mother," Dad began, "is not her daughter," I finished. "Remember what Mom used to say about second chances?" He smiled slightly. "They have to be earned, not given." Sophia had earned hers, spending weekends helping us set up the store, learning the business from the ground up. Today she would start as our customer service manager, a real job, not the fancy title Victoria had promised her. At exactly 10 a.m., I unlocked the doors. The crowd streamed in, their excited chatter filling the space with energy. Local reporters covered the opening, not society columnists this time, but real journalists interested in a story of community and redemption. "Welcome to Bennett and Daughter," Dad and I said together, greeting each customer like family. By noon, we'd made our first 100 sales. By closing time, we'd exceeded our projected opening day revenue by 40%. But the numbers weren't what mattered most. What mattered was the moment a young girl walked in with her mother, pointed to my name on the sign, and said, "Look, Mom, a girl can run a store too." What mattered was seeing Dad in his element again, explaining the difference between Phillips and flathead screwdrivers to a first-time homeowner. What mattered was Sophia, helping an elderly customer find the right light bulbs, genuine smile replacing her old smirk. That evening, after the last customer left, Dad and I sat in the office, Mom's old desk between us, now holding both our computers. "She would be proud," Dad said quietly, "of both of us." I looked around at what we'd built from the ashes of Victoria's deception. "You know what I think she'd be most proud of?" "What's that?" "That we proved success doesn't need schemes or fraud. Just honest work and real relationships." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Speaking of relationships, I got an interesting call yesterday from Margaret at the bank." I raised an eyebrow. Margaret had been my mentor before Victoria came along. "The board is investigating all of Victoria's connections. Seems she had quite a network of fraudulent loans. They're restructuring the entire commercial lending division." He paused. "They want you back as regional director." I thought about it for a moment, looking at our store, at the future we built. "Tell them thank you," I said finally. "But I'm exactly where I belong." Dad smiled, the proud smile I'd missed during Victoria's reign. "Yes, you are." Later that night, as I was closing up, I found Victoria's wedding seating card, still tucked away in my desk drawer. Kitchen entrance. It read in elegant script. I smiled and dropped it in the shredder. Some things aren't worth keeping, even as reminders. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from the prosecutor handling Victoria's case, confirming my appointment to testify next week. But that was just details now. The real victory wasn't in Victoria's downfall or even in saving Dad from her schemes. The real victory was in proving that success doesn't need validation from socialites or approval from society pages. Sometimes it just needs a father and daughter who believe in each other, a community that stands together, and the courage to rebuild something honest from the wreckage of broken dreams. As I locked up for the night, I looked at our sign one more time. Bennett and Daughter Hardware and Home. No crystal chandeliers, no imported marble, no fake sophistication. Just real value, honest work, and a legacy built to last. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in destroying what others build. It's in building something they can never destroy. The look on Uncle Richard's face was worth every sleepless night, every mocking comment, every moment of doubt I'd endured over the past 5 years. But let me start from the beginning. My name is James Sullivan, and I never took the traditional path. While my cousins went to prestigious universities, I worked full-time at our family's pharmaceutical manufacturing company, Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, taking online classes at night. Not because I couldn't get into a real college, I had been accepted to several, but because I saw something they didn't. The future of pharmaceutical manufacturing wasn't in the old methods my uncle clung to. It was in automation, in artificial intelligence, in systems that could adapt and learn. But to build that future, I needed to understand both the science and the practical reality of our industry. Another late night with your digital diploma mill. Uncle Richard would smirk whenever he caught me studying in my small office at the plant. He'd inherited control of the company when my father, his younger brother, died unexpectedly 6 years ago. My 10% ownership stake, left to me by Dad, was treated as a mere courtesy. The future is changing, Uncle Richard, I'd reply, not looking up from my advanced robotics textbook. We need to change with it. He'd laugh, that condescending chuckle that echoed through the boardroom whenever I tried to suggest improvements. The pharmaceutical industry is about tradition, James, about proven methods. League the sci-fi dreams to Silicon Valley. But while he was dismissing my ideas, I was watching our competitors, watching them struggle with the same problems we faced: contamination issues, production delays, quality control failures. Problems I knew could be solved with the right technology. My online degree wasn't just in engineering, it was a specialized program in pharmaceutical manufacturing automation. While my cousins were partying at their Ivy League schools, I was spending every free moment in our manufacturing plant, learning every process, every failure point, every opportunity for improvement. And I was building something that would change everything. You're wasting your time, my cousin Michael, Uncle Richard's oldest son, told me one day. He just graduated from Harvard Business School and had been fast-tracked to VP of Operations. Dad's never going to let some kid with an internet degree make major changes to his company. His company. That's how they all thought of it. They'd forgotten that my father had been the one to modernize Sullivan Pharmaceuticals in the first place, taking it from a small local operation to a regional powerhouse. They'd forgotten that his stake, my stake now, had been earned through innovation, not inheritance. But I hadn't forgotten, and I hadn't been wasting my time. For 3 years, I worked on my project in secret. During day shifts, I was just another mid-level employee, running quality control tests and maintaining equipment. But at night, in a small lab I'd set up in my apartment. I was building the future. I called it the Adaptive Manufacturing Intelligence System, ANIS, for short. It was more than just an automation system. It was an AI-driven platform that could monitor, adjust, and optimize pharmaceutical manufacturing processes in real time. It could predict equipment failures before they happened, adjust formulations for maximum efficiency, and ensure quality control standards that far exceeded FDA requirements. The patent application was filed under my name personally, not the company's. Uncle Richard's dismissal of my hobby meant he never asked me to sign an intellectual property agreement for my after-hours work. His arrogance would prove to be his biggest mistake. I finished my degree the same week I received notice that my patent had been approved. The timing couldn't have been better. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals was in trouble. Our largest competitor had just launched a new automated manufacturing system that cut their production costs by 30%. Our stock was falling. Shareholders were getting nervous. Uncle Richard called an emergency shareholders meeting. I sat quietly in the back, watching him try to calm the nervous investors with promises of cost-cutting measures and efficiency improvements. "We're implementing new standard operating procedures," he assured them, shooting a warning glance at Michael, who was squirming in his seat. What the shareholders didn't know was that 3 batches had failed quality control that week alone. At this rate, we'd lose our FDA certification within months. "Perhaps," I spoke up, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "we should discuss alternative solutions." Uncle Richard's face darkened. "This isn't the time for your theories, James. The adults are talking." I stood, straightening my tie, the same tie Dad had worn to his first board meeting. "Actually, Uncle Richard, this is exactly the time. Especially given the failed batches you're trying to hide from the shareholders." The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Michael half rose from his seat, but Uncle Richard waved him down. "Your online degree is worthless," he announced, trying to regain control of the room. "Step aside and let real businessmen handle this." I smiled, feeling the weight of the documents in my briefcase. Dad had always told me timing was everything in business. He was right. "Without this," I said calmly, pulling out my patent documents, "your company is worth nothing." The room went silent. "What are you talking about?" Uncle Richard demanded, but I could see the fear creeping into his eyes. I opened my laptop, connecting it to the presentation screen. "Let me show you the future of pharmaceutical manufacturing. The future I've spent the last 3 years building while you were busy mocking my education." As ANIS came to life on the screen, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the darkened window. I saw Dad there, in my stance, in my determination. He'd always believed in me, always supported my unconventional path. Now it was time to show everyone why. The shareholders leaned forward as I began my presentation, their eyes widening as they realized what I'd created. Uncle Richard sank into his chair, his face pale, as the full implications of my patent became clear. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in proving others wrong. It's in proving yourself right. And I was just getting started. The presentation screen glowed behind me as I demonstrated ANIS in action. I'd installed a test version in a sealed section of our manufacturing plant. Another detail Uncle Richard had been too arrogant to notice. "Over the past 3 months," I explained, pulling up the comparison data, "this system has run parallel to our current production line. The results speak for themselves." The numbers flashed across the screen. 45% reduction in production costs. 98% decrease in quality control failures. Real-time adaptation to manufacturing variables that had plagued the industry for decades. Impossible, Michael blurted out. Those numbers can't be real. I smiled, clicking to the next slide. The FDA certification team visited last week. Would you like to see their preliminary report? Uncle Richard's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. You had no authority to install experimental systems in our facility. This is a violation of. Actually, I interrupted. I had full authority. Check my employee contract. As quality control supervisor, I'm empowered to test new quality assurance methods. Everything was done by the book. I turned to the shareholders. What you're seeing isn't just an improvement. It's a revolution in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And the patent? I held up the documents. It's already being called the most significant innovation in the industry in 20 years. The room erupted in excited chatter. I could see dollar signs in the investors' eyes as they grasped the implications. Our competitors would pay billions for this technology. One shareholder called out. They already have, I replied calmly. I received offers from 3 major pharmaceutical companies this morning. They're quite interested in the fact that Sullivan Pharmaceuticals doesn't own the patent rights. Uncle Richard stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. This is outrageous. You developed this while working for us. The company owns nothing. I cut in. I developed this on my own time, with my own resources. The patent is registered to me personally. Your repeated insistence that my work was worthless and unofficial meant you never had me sign an IP agreement. A fact my lawyers thoroughly documented. I clicked to the final slide. A sales projection showing Sullivan Pharmaceuticals' future with and without AITA. The contrast was stark. Without this system, we'll lose FDA certification within 6 months. Our competitors' automated systems have made our current methods obsolete. With AITA, I gestured to the upward climbing graph. We become the industry leader in pharmaceutical manufacturing technology. The boardroom doors opened, and 3 people walked in. Uncle Richard's face went from purple to ash white as he recognized them. Allow me to introduce David Chin from Merck, Sarah Williams from Pfizer, and Thomas Rodriguez from Johnson & Johnson, I said pleasantly. They've each expressed strong interest in acquiring my patent. I invited them to today's meeting to observe the technology in action. Michael jumped up. This is a closed shareholders meeting. You can't. Actually, I held up a document. As a shareholder, I can invite relevant parties to observe non-confidential technological demonstrations. It's in the company bylaws, the ones Dad wrote. The 3 pharmaceutical representatives took seats at the back of the room, their interested gazes fixed on the presentation screen. So, I continued, we have a choice to make. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals can license my technology, maintaining family ownership, but paying standard market rates for the patent rights. Or, I glanced at the industry representatives. I can accept one of the several very generous offers I've received. Uncle Richard slammed his fist on the table. This is blackmail. No, I corrected him. This is business. The kind of business you claimed I couldn't understand with my worthless online degree. I pulled out another document, this one considerably thicker. This is my offer to Sullivan Pharmaceuticals. Exclusive license rights to AITA with certain conditions. What conditions? A shareholder asked eagerly. First, a restructuring of the board. My father's vision for this company was about innovation, not stagnation. We need leadership that understands that. Uncle Richard's face contorted. You want my position. No, I said quietly. I want the position I earned. Chief Technology Officer, with a seat on the board. The patent rights come with my appointment. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Without my technology, Sullivan Pharmaceuticals would fail within months. With it, we'd dominate the market. And if we refuse? Michael asked, his Harvard confidence cracking. I gestured to the industry representatives. Then I walk across the street to one of our competitors. My patent, my choice. One of the shareholders, an elderly man who'd known my father, spoke up. Richard, we need to vote on this now. Uncle Richard looked around the room, seeing his support crumbling. 20 years of ruling the company through fear and tradition, undone in a single morning. This isn't over, he hissed. Actually, I replied, it is, because there's one more thing you should know. I nodded to my lawyer, who had been waiting quietly by the door. She distributed copies of one final document to the board members. What's this? Uncle Richard demanded, scanning the pages. The results of the internal audit I commissioned 3 months ago. It seems there have been some irregularities in the company's recent FDA compliance reports. Irregularities that coincide with Michael's appointment as VP of Operations. Michael went pale. Uncle Richard started to speak, but I held up my hand. The full report has already been submitted to the relevant authorities. So you have a choice, Uncle Richard. Accept my offer, or explain to the FDA why our compliance reports don't match our actual production records. The room exploded into chaos. Board members huddled in corners. Whispered conversations filled the air, and through it all, I stood calmly at the podium, watching my uncle's empire crumble. Dad had taught me that success in business wasn't about prestigious degrees or family connections. It was about vision, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what you built. As the board called for an immediate vote on my proposal, I caught my reflection again in the window. This time, I didn't just see Dad's determination in my stance. I saw his smile. 6 months can change everything. I stood in my new office, my father's old office, looking out over the manufacturing floor. Below, ANIS hummed quietly, its adaptive systems orchestrating a perfect dance of automation and precision. Our production efficiency had increased by 250% since full implementation, and our stock price had tripled. The door opened, and Maria Rodriguez, our new VP of Operations, entered with the latest performance reports. The FDA inspectors just left, she announced, grinning. They're calling us the new gold standard in pharmaceutical manufacturing. They want to use our facility as a model for updated industry regulations. I nodded, remembering Uncle Richard's dire predictions about how my experimental system would destroy the company's reputation. He'd been wrong about that, just as he'd been wrong about so many things. The aftermath of that shareholders' meeting had been swift and decisive. The board had voted unanimously to accept my proposal, though not just because of the patent. The FDA compliance irregularities had been worse than even I'd suspected. Michael had been cooking the books for months, hiding quality control failures to protect his position. When the full investigation concluded, he'd faced criminal charges. Uncle Richard had been forced to resign to avoid being implicated in the cover-up. Have you seen today's Wall Street Journal? Maria asked, handing me the paper. The headline read, Sullivan Pharmaceuticals leads industry revolution. Stock soars on innovative AI manufacturing system. Below was a smaller headline. Former CEO Richard Sullivan faces SEC investigation in separate venture. I set the paper aside. Uncle Richard's downfall wasn't my concern anymore. I had bigger things to focus on. like the research center I'd established in my father's name, offering scholarships to online students developing innovative pharmaceutical technologies, or the mentorship program helping employees earn degrees while working, just as I had. My phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Sarah Chen at MIT. Her team wanted to collaborate on expanding AI's capabilities into biotechnology manufacturing. 5 years ago, someone with my worthless online degree wouldn't have gotten a response from MIT. Now they were calling me. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. To my surprise, it was Aunt Helen, Uncle Richard's wife. "James," she said softly, "do you have a moment?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat, looking uncomfortable in the office where her husband had once reigned. "I wanted to thank you," she began, "for what you did for Tommy." Tommy was my youngest cousin, Uncle Richard's second son. Unlike Michael, he'd never fit the mold of the privileged executive. He'd been quietly taking online engineering courses, hiding his studies from his father just as I had. After the shakeup, I'd found his application in the HR system rejected on Uncle Richard's orders. Now he was thriving in our technical division, his worthless online degree proving just as valuable as mine had. "Tommy earned his position," I replied, "just like everyone else here." Aunt Helen nodded, tears in her eyes. "Richard was wrong about so many things. About you, about education, about how to run this company." She paused. "Your father would be proud." Would he? I looked around the office at the changes I'd made. The old mahogany furniture had been replaced with modern workstations. The walls of family photos now shared space with technical diagrams and real-time manufacturing displays. But his most important lessons remained: integrity, innovation, and the courage to forge your own path. My computer chimed. An alert from AMEIS. The system had automatically detected and corrected a minor variation in one of our production lines, maintaining perfect quality without human intervention. Another small miracle that my internet degree had helped create. "How's Uncle Richard doing?" I asked, though I already knew. The industry newsletters kept track of his attempts to start over, each one failing as investors remembered the FDA scandal. "He's adjusting," Aunt Helen said carefully. "The SEC investigation has been difficult, but maybe it's what he needed. He's finally realizing that the world has changed." Indeed it had. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals had transformed from a traditional manufacturing company into a technology leader. Our market cap had grown from $50 million to over $2 billion in 6 months. Competitors who had once dismissed us were now licensing our technology. And it had all started with an online degree and a dream that wouldn't die. My assistant buzzed in. The quarterly board meeting was about to start. Aunt Helen stood to leave. "James," she said at the door, "I heard about the scholarship program you started. The one for online students." I nodded. Richard saw it too. He didn't say anything, but I think he finally understands what he failed to see before. After she left, I walked down to the manufacturing floor. The employees no longer stopped working when the boss appeared. They were too engrossed in their tasks, too proud of their contributions to this new era of pharmaceutical manufacturing. Tommy was at his station, fine-tuning one of AIS's sensor arrays. His online degree in robotics engineering hung proudly on the wall of his workspace, just like mine did in the office upstairs. "How's the calibration going?" I asked. He grinned, gesturing to his screen. The AI suggested a modification to the sensor alignment. It's improving accuracy by another 3%. I watched the system work, marveling at how something that had started as sketches on my apartment wall had grown into this. The future of pharmaceutical manufacturing, built by a kid with an online degree who refused to believe his education was worthless. Back in my office, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the nameplate that had once sat on Uncle Richard's desk. Richard Sullivan, CEO. It read in pompous gold letters. I dropped it in the recycling bin. My new nameplate was simpler, cleaner. James Sullivan, Chief Technology Officer. Below it was a small engraving of the first line of code I'd written for AMIS, back when it was just a dream. The board meeting would start soon. Another quarter of record profits to report, new innovations to discuss, more boundaries to push. But first, I sent a quick email to the head of our scholarship program. Double the number of online degree scholarships for next year. And add a note to the application. No degree is worthless if you have the vision to use it. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't in proving others wrong. It's in proving that success comes not from where you learned, but what you do with that knowledge. And sometimes, a worthless degree becomes priceless when combined with determination, integrity, and the courage to change an industry. Uncle Richard had been right about one thing. Tradition was important in the pharmaceutical industry, but he'd forgotten that every tradition started with someone willing to try something new. As I headed to the board meeting, I passed the company's mission statement, newly updated after my takeover. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, where innovation meets integrity. Below it, in smaller letters, was my father's favorite quote: "Education is never worthless. Vision is priceless." He'd been right all along.